When you're a company whose ideas and innovations shape the very way we live and work, you dare not be complacent. It's crucial that you rediscover and re-examine all your separate parts, so that when the pieces come together again, you approach your universe from a new perspective. Tomorrow is taking shape at a company called TRW.
Building aircraft, the likes of which the world has never seen. This is what we do. That's the value of performance. Northrop Grumman.
We could tell you how we push past the status quo. And how no one out-innovates us. Or we can just show you.
Here on my channel, we investigate UFO legacy programs. Compartmented special access, unacknowledged special access, and controlled access programs. These programs are recessed to the darkest corners of the U.S. defense industrial base and black budget, carved out of traditional oversight channels that perform full-spectrum recovery, storage, exploitation, derivation, and program protection of UFOs and technologies of unknown origin. This cadre of once unified programs galvanized under what we might call the quote-unquote Manhattan Project 2.0 now exists in scattered fiefdoms of siloed programs separated across agencies, offices, major armed forces departments, and more. Indeed, it appears that the UFO legacy program structure of today is actually a far cry from the stalwart legacy program portfolio that was established as early or even earlier than 1947, that featured strong direction and guidance from prominent figures like President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Though this web is more tangled and complex than a channel like mine can ever fully comprehend, we must still do our best. For all intents and purposes, the structure of UFO legacy programs over the past 80 years exists as a changeling, morphing and stretching to adapt to special access program reforms, creating cover programs and offices to enjoy ever-expanding secrecy in an ever-growing complex world. Indeed, it appears the last figure to command UFO legacy programs with an iron fist was the late Darth Vader himself, Dick Cheney. And this isn't just me saying this. Recently, David Grush discussed this himself.
I was just very disturbed to find how this was controlled, the self-licking ice cream cone, unaccountable, everybody owns a piece, nobody owns the outcome, and there's not really a mob boss. The closest person we got that I was aware of was, unfortunately, now deceased Vice President Dick Cheney, Darth Vader himself. Not shocking that he was involved in this. And essentially, when he left in 2009, that was the last time that these activities really had central leadership.
Alas, due to this complexity and recent bizarre attempts to craft outwardly false UFO legacy program outlines pushed by figures like Luis Elizondo, I recently began illustrating a UFO legacy program outline that I easily visualize as a pyramid. At the top of this pyramid sits the ever-amorphous UFO Control Group, a tenuous position or positions that was once ruled by Dick Cheney that I believe exists as a shell of its former self, with maybe James Clapper being the only individual to come even close to holding command and oversight over numerous scattered and siloed programs. Below the control group sits what I call UFO Legacy Program Administrators, various directorates, offices, and components within the U.S. Armed Forces branches and intelligence agencies, that operate an extremely strict yet stripped chain of command to ensure maximum UFO Legacy Program security, protection, and oversight. And I seriously cannot think of any better project to learn more about what I just said than my recent Air Force project. And I highly recommend learning the phrase, the quote-unquote hidden wing, and learn the name, Terry Phillips. Under the Legacy Program Administrators sit one of my all-time favorite acronyms, FFRDCs, or Federally Funded Research and Development Centers. Government-owned, contractor-operated, or GOCO institutions that allow legacy programs to utilize institutions such as the MITRE Corporation, AEROSPACE Corporation, RAND Corporation, and DOE/NNSA national labs such as Sandia, Los Alamos, and Oak Ridge, to operate as subject matter experts and R&D program aces within the legacy programs, serving long-term and specialized needs their program sponsor could not accomplish in-house. I strongly believe this FFRDC layer of my pyramid exists to arbitrate knowledge and access to materials, craft, and bodies to the lowest level of the UFO Legacy Program structure, defense industrial base contractors. I have furthered this program structure by stating this legacy program framework is bound together by the U.S. Defense Industrial Base, whose authoritative channels are often bypassed to allow UFO legacy programs to harness any U.S. military and intelligence asset needed to accomplish these clandestine mission directives. Indeed, I have used analogy to liken the beautiful limestone casing that once protected the Great Pyramids of Giza to UFO legacy program structure. The limestone casing in our instance here is comprised of SAPs, CAPs, USAPs, carve-out contracts, program protection offices like the DARPA SID, AFOSI PJ and Terry Phillips, DOE OICI, General Counterintelligence, Sean Kirkpatrick, etc. And again, I believe for the overwhelming number of legacy programs in existence today, this structure is extremely steadfast and strict. And the vast majority of these programs operate not without oversight like many would claim, but instead extremely rigorous and narrow chains of command and oversight. But okay, any returning viewer to my channel knows all of this already. We talk about the legacy program structure at the beginning of nearly every single one of my recent videos, so why am I saying all this? I reference the complex evolution of UFO legacy programs and their rigid structures, because I believe these concepts are largely uniform across these clandestine programs that are tasked with one or more elements of the retrieval, storage, and exploitation of non-human intelligence and technical vehicles. But, and this is a big but, there seems to be one element involved in legacy programs that breaks this mold. An entity that should reside on the lowest level of the legacy program structure, next to Lockheed Martin, SAIC, Battelle Memorial Institute, and others. An entity that should largely be a cog in the program machine, with only need-to-know personnel read into very specific compartments of these technologies of unknown origin-focused programs. This defense industrial base prime contractor has a very traceable evolution alongside the maturing and changing of UFO programs. A contractor whose acquisitions and senior members have direct ties to infamous UFO crash retrieval cases, expansion of special access program security mechanisms that I believe such programs morph to take advantage of, and a contractor who's housed numerous individuals one might call UFO legacy program gatekeepers or senior personnel that I have both named before, and further names I guarantee you have never heard of. This military-industrial complex staple has seemingly carved out its own slice of the legacy program pie. And thanks to recent statements by David Grush discussing elements of private contractors using IRAD, aka Independent Research and Development Funds, during the early days of the War on Terror as the impetus for their own almost breakaway programs. Perhaps, just perhaps, we can isolate in on this specific contractor as retaining such quote-unquote breakaway programs with loose to no oversight from their original government customer. And today, These programs in question appearingly operate at nondescript or closed locations, employ individuals you will both recognize and be introduced to, and may just operate outside of the traditional legacy program framework, or enjoy increased liberties and access to quote-unquote core secrets over other prime defense contractors. When it's so nice, we have to do it twice. And thus today's investigation will be part 2 of our investigation into Northrop Grumman and UFO Legacy Program operations. Now before we get started here, recently I made a Lockheed Martin Legacy Programs video. This project served as a replacement for an incomplete and quite frankly poor Lockheed video I created early on in my channel's history. This video today on Northrop is not the same scenario. No, indeed, I still highly recommend my first Northrop Grumman project. Yet, I still think there are countless remaining and very interesting strings to pull on and things to learn. But alas, that first video primarily followed Northrop as it exists in UFO lore. Edgar Fouché's claims of Northrop serving as a core R&D partner on the TR-3B alien reproduction vehicle. The alleged Colonel Steve Wilson's claims regarding Teledyne Ryan that would be purchased by Lockheed, serving as a core legacy program contractor. William Hamilton's early explorations of Northrop's Tahone radar cross-section facility, housing an underground anthill, and much more. In my recent projects, I have moved to be as specific as possible, naming dates, locations, programs, history, and most importantly, personnel with current or prior history in UFO, crash retrieval, and reverse engineering operations. Thus, for this project, we will view Northrop through the lens of specificity. And for that reason, we will not just be analyzing Northrop Grumman as it exists today, but also its major acquisitions, such as TRW Inc., and TRW spinoff FFRDC, the AEROSPACE Corporation, and identify senior legacy program personnel and intriguing ties to modern-day programs in both of these entities. In this project, we will spend such significant time investigating TRW. This project should really be called Northrop Grumman and TRW. But as you will see, I find the most value in investigating TRW, a contractor with countless ties to UFO reverse engineering and crash retrieval programs, in reference to its integration into Northrop Grumman. In today's project, you should also seek to find a critical analysis of Northrop Grumman's UFO Legacy Program security infrastructure, likely ran by the illustrious former Senior Executive Service and Air Force Special Access Program Security Director, and Executive Director of the Air Force Office of Special Investigations Office of Special Projects, Mr. Terry Phillips. After all here, Northrop Grumman is far more nondescript when it comes to public testimony of whistleblower discussion of UFO legacy programs. The father of the B-2 Spirit bomber seems to have deployed far more effective countermeasures to keep their names out of the UFO public zeitgeist. Competitors of Northrop like Lockheed Martin are everywhere in the UFO topic. Lockheed has even been labeled by name in congressional hearings on the subject of UFOs. Yet Northrop Grumman maintains its profile spoken only as whispers behind the scenes. And while defense industrial base prime contractors like Lockheed Martin seem to adhere to the traditional legacy program structure, an example being Lockheed obediently standing down attempts to divest UFO materials to the OSAP program through the Prospective Special Access Program, or PSAP Kona Blue, at the behest of Glenn Gaffney, Mary Sturtevant, and the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology. Northrop does not appear to honor such chains of command. Part 1 of my Northrop Grumman project sought to investigate the question of if Northrop engages with UFO legacy programs. Today's Part 2 seeks to answer not if, but the who, what, when, where, and why of Northrop's UFO legacy program structure. So join me today as we explore Northrop to answer 3 simple questions. 1. who in Northrop Grumman and their many acquisitions has operated in a UFO Legacy Program senior capacity? 2. Did Northrop really create quote-unquote breakaway UFO Legacy programs that loosely or don't answer at all to their government customers? As we extrapolate from the recent words of David Grush. And finally, 3. What does Northrop Grumman's modern-day legacy program structure look like? Due to the ever-growing complexity of my projects and direct naming of programs, dates, places, and individuals, I would like to continue the trend I set forth in my Air Force project by detailing an executive summary of all of my research findings. Indeed, I want to waste no time jumping into this investigation, so let's briefly summarize Northrop Grumman, its corporate history and many acquisitions, and our critical points of discussion for our investigation today. Northrop Grumman operates under the expressed mission of, quote, forging technologies that push the boundaries of possible, end quote. Founded in 1994 under the joining of the Northrop Corporation and Grumman Corporation, Northrop Grumman today enjoys its prestigious position as the 5th largest contractor of the U.S. federal government and ranks as the 100th on the Fortune 500 list of America's largest corporations. Regardless of the tool of war, Northrop Grumman is involved, with primary expertise in advanced weaponry, aircraft, missile defense, mission solutions, and space, out of Northrop Grumman's 4 operational sections: aeronautics systems, mission systems, space systems, and defense systems. And throughout this project, we will devote a significant amount of time implicating 3 of Northrop's 4 major operating areas within UFO Legacy programs. These being mission systems, space systems, and of course, aeronautics systems. Northrop Grumman is the proud father of several of the most iconic and incredible aircraft ever conceived and flown by the U.S. Armed Forces. And these include the B-2 Spirit bomber, B-21 Raider, E-2 Hawkeye, F-35 Lightning II, T-38 Talon, the mysterious RQ-180, and that's only counting Northrop's aircraft achievements and acknowledged airframes at that. NG is one of 5 US Prime Defense Contractors alongside Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, and General Dynamics. Northrop Grumman and other primes serve a unique position within the world of government contracting. These contractors, unlike non-primes, maintain a direct contractual relationship with the US federal government. Northrop Grumman exists as the amalgamation of countless acquisitions over the decades, many of which occurred as a result of the quote-unquote Last Supper in 1993, a defense industry consolidation that took place in the wake of plans to decrease defense spending after the end of the Cold War. These numerous and infamous acquisitions include Teledyne Ryan, elements of Sperry Rand, Litton Industries, Aerojet, and most importantly in my opinion, Thompson Ramo Woodbridge, aka TRW Inc. And thus, we arrive to our first major discussion point of today's project. We will analyze Thompson Ramo Woodbridge, its history and prestige within the US aerospace and defense industries, TRW's acquisition of BDM and integration into Northrop Grumman, specifically into Northrop's space systems and mission systems operations. We will identify several individuals who served critical roles within TRW, some of whom transitioned into Northrop Grumman that both have been previously connected to UFO Legacy programs, and that I will accuse here today of involvement in such programs. These figures include Dr. Edward Dahl, a critical and underreported figure from the 1953 Kingman, Arizona UFO crash retrieval. Fans of this channel will know this is one of my all-time favorite crash cases. Dr. Dahl was named by primary Kingman witness Arthur Stansel Jr. as coordinating personnel and resources to the UFO crash site. We can even observe Dahl being directly named by Stansel's own hand in his diary entries the day prior to Stansel allegedly visiting the crash site. We will trace Dr. Dahl's history from a physicist on the Manhattan Project, to allegedly operating within UFO crash retrieval teams, to serving as a senior vice president within TRW's systems group. This systems group ultimately morphed into the two Northrop Grumman organizations listed above, Space and Mission Systems. We will also investigate components of TRW's mission systems under Dahl, and these include TRW's Special Projects, which was instrumental to building SIGINT, or Signals Intelligence Satellites, for the NRO and CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology's Joint Program B. Program B, of course, operated out of the spooky Pine Gap, Australia. This will directly connect back to prior projects of mine, including intriguing figures associated with Program B, including Program B Director and CIA DS&T Deputy Director R. Evan Heinemann, who was labeled by Admiral Bobby Ray Inman as possessing first-hand experience within UFO crash retrieval programs. This will lead into the investigation of the intriguing history of one Mr. Richard Haver, who served in TRW onto Northrop Grumman from 1999 to 2010 as Vice President for Intelligence Programs. Haver maintained a curious relationship with Dick Cheney throughout his intelligence career prior to Northrop, being hand-selected by Cheney as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence Policy, as well as being recruited mid-Northrop service to assist Cheney on intelligence transition teams. And of course, again, we know from David Grush, Dick Cheney, Darth Vader himself, operated as the head of the Snake for UFO Legacy Programs. Speaking of heads of the Snake, we will also investigate colleagues near and dear to Lieutenant General James Clapper, discussed by David Grush himself as managing the crash retrieval issue. These include PDDNI, or Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence Stephanie O'Sullivan, who prior to her spook career in the CIA, including Deputy Director of CIA DS&T, served a data-masked career in the Office of Naval Intelligence and TRW, where she managed, quote, oversight for a series of sensitive projects for TRW, end quote.
In fact, without being inappropriate, I will say that General Clapper was well aware of the crash retrieval issue, managed the crash retrieval issue, and when he was the DNI, USDI, and DIA director, he placed people in critical roles to manage this issue, both publicly and I'll just say non-publicly as well. And I'll allow the audience distill what I'm saying at the risk of being inappropriate or going too far with my discussion. So General Clapper, Stephanie O'Sullivan, other folks in the IC that are well aware of this issue, that were in rooms discussing this issue, I ask you to be greater leaders on this. I should not be the only former military officer and intelligence official that is being completely candid with the information that they were exposed to. So
I jumped at the chance to be at the center of that work and to work for Jim Clapper. He is probably the most selfless leader that I've ever worked with, and I've worked with some real legends. That's a somewhat unique path that I've taken to be standing here today. So, just to be clear, and to set expectations, I need to make one point about the 3.5 decades of work that I just covered. I've worked on the design and deployment of some pretty amazing systems, and led teams that put incredible technology into operations.
Also of interest here are O'Sullivan's positions post-UFO Legacy Program oversight alongside Clapper, that include the Aerospace Corporation, Battelle Memorial Institute, Peraton, etc. In reference to O'Sullivan, we will also briefly return to one Don Myricks, former ADNI ATNF, CIA DS&T Deputy Director, and co-worker of O'Sullivan at TRW in the early 1980s. In this same vein of Clapper, O'Sullivan, and the UFO crash retrieval issue, we will also investigate one Michael Dempsey, a man who served under Clapper and above O'Sullivan as Deputy Director of National Intelligence within the Obama administration, who actually personally briefed Obama plenty of times. If anyone partially read Obama onto legacy activities, it would have been Dempsey. In the vein of today's video, Dempsey would move on from OD&I to serve as Northrop Grumman's VP, Vice President for Government Affairs. Let us also analyze the federally funded Research and Development Center, FFRDC, the Aerospace Corporation, that spun off from TRW in 1960 due to growing concerns from other government contractors that feared TRW's Air Force advisory role gave it unfair access to cutting-edge technologies. We will observe the Aerospace Corporation's absolutely pitiful attempts to answer Representative Burleson's and David Grush's interrogatories while offering up two names on the executive level of the Aerospace Corporation I believe are paramount to our investigation in the larger UFO Legacy Program investigation at large. Randall G. Walden, former Director and Program Executive Officer of the Air Force Rapid Capabilities Office, RCO, and Edward C. Aldrich, former Undersecretary and Secretary of the Air Force, who I believe was a critical figure in reorganizing Air Force legacy programs leading to extreme compartmentalization and siloing of these programs.
Grush helped us write the interrogatives, the letters that we sent to the CIA, that we sent to the Aerospace Corporation, and the Navy as well. And Grush is going to continue to help in that regard. I think we have got some more letters that we're putting together. We've already had a briefing from the Aerospace Corporation in a secure setting. What I can say is that it really didn't turn up anything whatsoever. But at least we got a response.
Possibly the most critical aspect to our entire investigation today. We will study David Grush's recent Megyn Kelly interview and distill Grush speaking on prime contractor activities in the onset of the War on Terror, aka the early 2000s. According to Grush, this time epoch saw select contractors harness IRAD, or Independent Research and Development Funds, a system in which a contractor can pursue critical national security projects and choose whether or not to read in government sponsors, but bill them for this work nonetheless, to actually spin off their own unaccountable UFO crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs.
Early on the global war on terror, a lot of the money that was initially given to these companies was essentially reallocated for overseas contingency operations, and these contractors essentially started to do their own thing, if you will, something called IRAD, Internal Research and Development. And privately, they continued certain things that actually the government was trying to cancel as it relates to the subject. And they went off and retrieved and exploited things essentially on their own and only loosely accountable back to their government handlers.
And of course, we will implicate Northrop Grumman in these breakaway legacy activities and identify enormous reported IRAD funds from both Northrop and TRW from 1998 to 2002 roughly. And we will investigate TRW being absolutely slammed with lawsuits and GAO investigations for numerous IRAD infractions and misappropriation of funds. Perhaps then, it should come as no surprise that early 1980s CIA Directorate of Science and Technology memos will reveal the CIA DS&T used contractor IRAD activities out of, you guessed it, TRW, to support agency interests and activities. All of this will lead us to studying the possibility of very bizarre and very deep black Northrop UFO programs that feature little to no accountability from a government sponsor. Returning viewers know how much I love the Northrop Tahone Radar Cross-Section Facility, an alleged closed former radar cross-section range critical to stealth testing of the B-2 Spirit bomber that features extensive underground infrastructure. I have gone on record before to state, with confidence might I add, Tahone and its sister Lockheed site Helendale exist within a larger network of deep underground military bases within the Antelope Valley, and this network focuses largely on UFO retrieval and research, development, test, and evaluation. Recent brave and intrepid explorers ventured onto the grounds of Tahone within the last few months, allowing us shocking new insights into this facility I cannot wait to explore with you. We will attempt to identify the current security structure behind Northrop's modern-day UFO Legacy Program portfolio. Relevant personnel here include revisiting SES, former Executive Director of AFOSI Office of Special Projects, and former Air Force SAP Security Director Terry Phillips, who now serves as Vice President for Security at, of course, Northrop Grumman. We will analyze several directors of security under Phillips that I strongly believe engage with Northrop's more quote-unquote exotic activities. And these include John C. Freestone, Kathy Andrews, and most intriguingly, Vince Devine. All three of these directors of security under Phillips possess prestigious and curious CVs worthy of further investigation. Take Vince Devine, for example, Director of Security and SAPCO, aka Director of Northrop's Special Access Program Central Office, 4NG's Space Sector, for example. Prior to Northrop, Devine served as Deputy Director for Security in the Air Force RCO, or Rapid Capabilities Office, Deputy Director of Security supporting USDI, Under Secretary of Defense for Intelligence SAPCO, Director of Security for ACOM, which was once EG&G, and SAP Functional Area Lead for DARPA Strategic Technology Office. And lastly today, we will study what was once Northrop Grumman's answer to the infamous Lockheed Skunk Works, the 1990s Northrop Advanced Technology and Design Center, or NATDC. We will analyze personnel involved with this group, the group's acknowledged airframe projects, and the bizarre disappearance from Northrop Grumman that I wager was partially, if not fully, to leverage this NATDC exclusively for black budget, classified, and possibly Northrop's own UFO legacy activities. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive in. To begin our investigation into Northrop Grumman, I do think it absolutely necessary to study the founding, evolution, personnel, and intriguing claims of UFO Legacy Program operations surrounding Northrop's 2002 crown jewel acquisition, TRW Inc. TRW Inc., aka Thompson Ramo Woodbridge Inc., actually has roots that can be traced back to 1901 and existed since 1965 until its purchase by Northrop Grumman in 2002. TRW specialized in a variety of business ventures, and these included aerospace, electronics, automotive, defense, and credit reporting, but was renowned for its defense and aerospace prowess, serving an instrumental role in the US space race, developing spacecraft such as Pioneer 1, Pioneer 10, and Apollo. Indeed, TRW operated as a major pioneer in the defense and communication satellite industry, constructing cutting-edge spy, communications, and defense satellites, including the Defense Support Program DSP satellites for detecting missile launches. And if you remember the DSP, I have talked about this program many of times before, including prior videos where the DSP tracked fast walkers, unknown objects entering or leaving Earth's atmosphere at incomprehensible speeds. In the 1950s and 1960s, TRW also served instrumental defense and national security roles, and this was through its Space Technology Laboratories STL division that evolved into the TRW Systems Group, which comprised TRW's entire electronics and defense sector. And such projects included leading the development of the US's first ICBM, or Intercontinental Ballistic Missiles, and later Titan missile programs. Northrop Grumman described its crown jewel acquisition TRW as a, quote, leading developer of military and civil space systems and satellite payloads, as well as a leading global integrator of complex mission-enabling systems and services, end quote. Today, the blood of TRW still runs strong in the veins of Northrop Grumman, with numerous individuals who once served senior executive roles on TRW maintaining the same positions within Northrop Grumman. In the executive summary of today's video, we spoke of Northrop's 4 main modern-day mission areas: aeronautic systems, mission systems, space systems, and defense systems. Upon Northrop's purchase of TRW in 2002, 2 new operating areas under Northrop Grumman emerged from that acquisition: mission systems and space technologies. By 2018, Northrop Grumman acquired Orbital ATK, which was integrated into a new sector called NGIS, or Northrop Grumman Innovative Systems. Come 2020, NGIS and space technologies merged into the modern-day space systems. So you can see the beating heart of TRW still comprises 2 of 4 mission sectors within Northrop Grumman: space systems and mission systems. Yesterday's TRW, today's Northrop Grumman Mission Systems, quote, is a trusted provider of mission-enabling solutions for global security. We have a wide portfolio of secure, affordable, integrated, and multi-domain systems and technologies. Our differentiated battle management and cyber solutions deliver timely, mission-enabling information and provide superior situational awareness and understanding to protect the US and its global allies, end quote. In a similar vein, yesterday's TRW, today's Northrop Grumman Space Systems, quote, is an industry-leading provider of end-to-end space and launch systems and capabilities, serving national security, civil, and commercial customers, end quote. From a quick top-down glance, one may assume Northrop Grumman's involvement in UFO legacy programs is sequestered to Northrop's Aeronautic Systems Division. After all, this element within the defense colossus is headquartered in Palmdale, California, and produces military aircraft, autonomous systems, aerospace structures, engages with myriad, highly compartmented aerospace special access programs, and often harnesses Northrop's little-known version of the Lockheed Skunk Works we will speak on later, the Northrop Grumman Advanced Design and Technology Center, or ADTC. Northrop's Aeronautic Systems Division is even one of 3 contractors alongside Boeing and Lockheed Martin that enjoys extremely classified RDT&E work and unparalleled access to the infamous government-owned, contractor-operated Air Force Plant 42. Plant 42 has been a staple in my work. Most recently, I referenced Plant 42 in relation to the quote-unquote hidden wing, the Air Force's alleged test and evaluation program portfolio across the Western ranges that performs T&E, or again, test and evaluation, on recovered non-human vehicles, alien reproduction vehicles, and derivative airframes. According to my understanding of the hidden wing, oftentimes these craft, both non-human and ours, are transported to Edwards Air Force Base for T&E in plain sight, literally loaded onto trailers and driven from Plant 42. While I agree Northrop Grumman Aeronautics highly likely engages with the hidden wing and other UFO legacy RDT&E programs, alongside Boeing and Lockheed out of Air Force Plant 42, focused on the reverse engineering and exploitation of non-human technical vehicles, I do think it also behooves us to study the legacy of TRW within Northrop Grumman to find evidence and existence of UFO legacy programs. And I think this for several reasons. One, because I theorize that prior to its acquisition by Northrop, TRW had decades of experience within UFO crash retrieval and reverse engineering special access programs. And also because of several intriguing individuals with possible legacy backgrounds transitioning roles between Northrop and TRW in the space and mission systems sectors. Take former top executive of TRW, Donald C. Winter, for example, who transitioned to corporate VP and lead of mission systems for Northrop Grumman post-acquisition. Winters joined TRW in 1972, where by the 1980s, he would join DARPA, or the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, under Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative. The Strategic Defense Initiative, aka SDI, aka Star Wars, was a proposed missile defense system intended to protect the United States from attack by ballistic nuclear missiles.
Here, an artist's projection of the president's vision.
Banning into space, a layered defense to protect the country from nuclear devastation. U.S. spy satellites would watch the world below, detect Soviet missiles blasting off, compute the position and speed of each missile, alert battle stations in space, on Earth. The first response, space-based kinetic energy weapons fire high-speed projectiles from hypervelocity guns, intercepting enemy missiles as they are boosted through the atmosphere. Popped up into space, Earth-based nuclear-powered X-ray lasers fire their radioactive rays. Attack rays from land-based excimer lasers are redirected by huge mirrors orbiting in space. Chemical lasers fire beams that burn through the shell of the onrushing missile. Particle beam weapons with pulsing rays join the attack.
Of course, in many projects before, I have stated I believe the SDI back-channeled funds to UFO legacy programs, and also sought to harness SDI's lethality and target hardening programs and particle beam weapon systems to act offensively against UFOs. I will go so far as to say that I believe the UFO aspect of SDI far predated Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, conceptually beginning under the Eisenhower administration as a space-based system of high-powered microwave weaponry to down non-human technical vehicles. But I digress. Right now, I am more interested in Winter's primary SDI responsibility, a program called Talent Gold. Talent Gold served as a project designed to serve an essential prerequisite for deploying a high-energy laser weapon system within SDI. Talent Gold was, quote, a project to develop a low-energy laser to demonstrate acquisition and tracking of targets from space and to precisely point a narrow laser beam, end quote. Talent Gold and Teal Ruby were mentioned by one metallurgical engineer, Albert Bruce Collins, to the legendary Leonard Stringfield, as programs oriented to track and possibly down UFOs during the 1970s and SDI, as a direct result to NRO satellites detecting UFOs all the way back in the 1960s. Collins here truly is a fascinating tale, but not one I will revisit in its entirety here. But I fully recommend checking out my NRO project to learn more about his alleged first-hand encounter with a recovered UFO egg-shaped craft that featured a multi-hulled interior.
This year, the SDI is earmarked for $4.8 billion in the Defense Department's budget request, with another $600 million in the Department of Energy's. Congress is now debating these requests. Well over half the SDI money is slated for the defense industry, mainly the big defense contractors like Hughes, Rockwell, Boeing, TRW, Lockheed. For example, General Motors, having recently bought Hughes, has so far been awarded over $500 million in SDI contracts. Lockheed is close behind, while Boeing, TRW, and McDonnell Douglas are all in the $1/3 billion range. Not surprisingly, the defense industry tends to be among SDI's most enthusiastic supporters.
Post-SDI, Winters would return to TRW as CEO and even operate as the 74th United States Secretary of the Navy. I personally find it intriguing. A man with Winters' CV would be the first to spearhead mission systems within Northrop Grumman. The sector of Northrop, referred to as the, quote, coolest and most dynamic portfolio in the company, end quote, by Northrop's Senior Director of Security, John Freestone. This comment will age as even more intriguing later on in this video, as we implicate Freestone in operating Northrop Grumman UFO Legacy Program secrecy and protection under the illustrious Vice President for Security at Northrop, Mr. Terry Phillips.
You have to draw the line someplace, then cross over it. That's how new ideas start, how new worlds open up. Technology from a company called TRW helps chart new worlds. Today, we draw the line where it has never been before. Tomorrow, we'll cross over it. Tomorrow is taking shape at a company called TRW.
Even outside of my first Northrop project, TRW has surfaced in several of my works prior in relation to UFO programs. These include analysis of TRW's own acquisitions, most famously BDM, or Braddock Dunn and McDonald Corporation, purchased by TRW in 1997. BDM is rather infamous on my channel, specifically in relation to housing Navy Rear Admiral and Director of Naval Intelligence Sumner Shapiro on its board of directors. Back in the late 1980s, Shapiro was actually recommended as a point of contact by ultra spook and rogues gallery figure of this channel, Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, to NASA mission specialist Bob Eschler for information on recovered UFOs. Within several meetings with Eschler, Shapiro would intriguingly confirm that he had studied recovered non-human vehicles in an official capacity up close, and that many of these craft had interlocking components that had to be assembled and disassembled in specific sequence when these recovered vehicles were rotated around various laboratories within the continental United States. And this sequence of assembly and disassembly is an intriguing parallel to the 1948 Aztec, New Mexico UFO crash retrieval, one of my all-time favorite cases. And let us not forget TRW's connections as a managing or critical entity to the utterly fascinating outline of the Zodiac crash retrieval program, allegedly based on the real experiences of one pseudonym Sedge Masters, written by another pseudonym Greg Halifax. This web is captivating to say the least, and features substantial investigations by the respected Richard Dolan to track down names involved with this allegedly true retrieval group featuring TRW, including Dolan stating he uncovered the true identity of the individual behind the pseudonym Sedge Masters and Greg Halifax within the Zodiac story, an attorney hailing from TRW. The attorney here in question is suggested to be one Mr. Jeffrey W. Griffith, and the Zodiac participant described in the writings is suggested to be one Mrs. Mary Elizabeth Elliott. Griffith here was indeed an attorney on the corporate counsel for Hughes Aircraft, which housed the R&W, Ramo and Woodbridge of TRW, until the two split off in 1953, before forming TRW officially in 1965. Indeed, Griffith's own bio states alongside Hughes, Griffith served as, quote, general counsel of another corporation headquartered in Southern California, end quote. My guess here, of course, is the former TRW Space Park of Redondo Beach, California. What I find most intriguing about 1998 Zodiac is a brief description of the project within the experiences of the pseudonym Sedge Masters, which of course may be on Mary Elizabeth Elliott. Zodiac was a program that was, quote, able to skirt the military chain of command with impunity, spend money earmarked for other projects, and generally do whatever it damn well pleased, all in the name of UFOs and their importance to national security, end quote. Of course, if you recall my UFO Legacy Program pyramid, I often state the defense industrial base of the United States is merely a tool of UFO legacy programs, whose authoritative channels, assets, and infrastructure may be bypassed or even commandeered by legacy activities whenever certain assets or infrastructure is needed to accomplish these clandestine mission operations. I know a lot of people here would like me to expand on Zodiac now, but this really is another story for another day, as that rabbit hole deserves its own video. Zodiac even appears in Jacques Vallée's forbidden science journals, such as a date marked 3 March 2001, in which an entry describes Eric Davis relaying the story of Zodiac to Vallée. Here Davis described and reported on a 10 velobind volume housed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base that featured data from the Roswell, New Mexico crash and a special study done by TRW. My trust in Davis is wafer thin to say the least, as I believe he has lied to my face about the existence of alien reproduction vehicles and derivative technologies. So I personally would be keen to see Davis expand on this and Zodiac at large. Additionally, TRW can be found throughout my video on DUMBs, aka Deep Underground Military Bases, as conducting late 1960s and 1970s studies on, quote, state-of-the-art tube vehicle systems, end quote, detailing underground train systems as deep as 3,000 feet underground that could travel at speeds of 450 or greater miles per hour. Later on in this project, we will be discussing and exploring the possibility of the now allegedly defunct Northrop Radar Cross-Section Range to home, housing extensive underground facilities that connect to a larger network of DUMBs beneath the Antelope Valley. And of course, we will argue why this network, in Tohon in particular, is integral to Western Range UFO RDT&E programs. One must wonder if TRW helped conceptualize and design transportation infrastructure for these sites, if, of course, they exist. But before we continue down the path of TRW, evolving into Northrop Grumman and Northrop Grumman at large, let us quickly take a side avenue to explore TRW's critical spin-off, the AEROSPACE Corporation. In 1960, TRW spun off the AEROSPACE Corporation from half of TRW's Space Technology Laboratories. The AEROSPACE Corporation was founded because of other contractors at the time believing TRW's Air Force advisory role granted it unfair access to technologies. Think of TRW and the AEROSPACE Corporation as similar to Science Applications International Corporation spinning off Leidos in 2013. Although the newly separated SAIC and Leidos focused on different business pursuits, both organizations shared similar, if not the same personnel, corporate practices and missions, access to U.S. government special access programs, and most importantly, in my opinion, involvement in clandestine UFO Legacy Program USAPs. Today, the AEROSPACE Corporation functions as a nonprofit operating a federally funded research and development center, or FFRDC, sponsored by the Department of Defense and Air Force, located in El Segundo, California. As I pointed out in my Air Force project, El Segundo is a major U.S. hub for aerospace SAPs, where the AFOSI-PJ, or OSI Office of Special Projects, keeps a permanent station. Outside of their technical oversight and objective analysis for U.S. national security space programs, working closely with organizations such as the Air Force, Space Force, and NRO, I believe the AEROSPACE Corporation is paramount to UFO legacy programs. Indeed, I believe the AEROSPACE Corporation led legacy program efforts in a parallel track to TRW and then Northrop Grumman. So analyzing the distant spawn of Northrop is actually well worth our time here. Recently on the Seco Activo podcast, Representative Eric Burleson stated he had sent out numerous interrogatories to hostile entities involved with UFO legacy program operations. Interrogatories, of course, exist as a formal set of written questions required by law to be answered by an adversary in order to clarify matters of fact and help to determine in advance what facts may be presented at any trial in a case. Think of interrogatories as similar to subpoena. Several of these interrogatories sent by Burleson and presumably written in part, if not in whole, by David Grush were gutted, neutered, and interrogatories for one entity that I actually talk about quite often on this channel were just straight up not delivered. Comically here, the CIA did indeed respond to their set of interrogatories and actually directed Burleson and obviously David Grush back to AERO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office.
Chairwoman Luna and the task force and the committee staff, certainly I assisted in my other professional capacity, helping Representative Burleson's office, did send legal interrogatives to several agencies and private companies. CIA was one of them, and curiously enough, CIA provided what I considered an extremely disrespectful response. They declined to answer our interrogatives on this matter, which is their participation in crash retrieval operations, and just referred us to the Pentagon's AERO office, which has a nebulous and concerning history in itself. And I just find it very interesting that CIA did that.
The Aerospace Corporation was the only other entity to respond to interrogatories and sent corporate members to waste time, stating they knew nothing about UFO legacy programs.
Grush helped us write the interrogatives, the letters that we sent to the CIA, that we sent to the Aerospace Corporation, and the Navy as well. And Grush is going to continue to help in that regard. I think we have got some more letters that we're putting together. We've already had a briefing from the Aerospace Corporation in a secure setting. What I can say is that it really didn't turn up anything whatsoever. But at least we got a response, and they took the time to fly to DC to meet with us in person.
And again, it's clear that David Grush was the impetus and guiding hand behind these interrogatories. So we can safely assume he thought that the Aerospace Corporation was deep enough in legacy program operations that the FFRDC warranted a set of questions directly. And let me plainly state here, David Grush is one of the few men on this planet whose word I can take to the bank. For this reason, amongst others, I am in full solidarity with Grush that the Aerospace Corporation is absolutely involved in legacy programs. So the Aerospace Corporation sent a team green behind the gills to waste time and state that the FFRDC had no involvement in such clandestine UFO programs. Well, in a perfect world, who should have been sitting there answering questions honestly about Aerospace Corporation's involvement in the programs? For one, I recommend viewers who have not already watch my Air Force Legacy Programs video. I consider this analysis of the modern-day structure of UFO legacy programs within the Air Force my most critical work to date. Within the project, I named the Air Force Rapid Capabilities Office, or RCO, under SAF-AQ, or Air Force Acquisition, as a critical administrative element within Air Force UFO legacy programs. Specifically, I stated that RCO can take other Air Force involvement, such as further subcomponents of Air Force acquisition, like AQL, AQX, or AQR, within UFO programs and package this involvement neatly, with RCO as a controlling office built to operate within the quote-unquote gray areas of standard acquisition. In the project, we explored Senior Executive Service Member, Director, and Program Executive Officer for the Rapid Capabilities Office, a man by the name of Randall G. Walden, and I identified Walden as a very senior, very active member within UFO legacy programs. Walden's CV is fascinating. Outside of RCO, Walden served numerous roles within the Air Force that one could connect to UFO SAPs, including involvement within a classified flight test squadron commander out of Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada from 1997 to 1998, and technical director for the Air Force Acquisition Directorate of Special Programs, SAF-AQL, that I just mentioned earlier, and Director of Air Force Test and Evaluation, or AFTE, another critical component of my Air Force video I call the Hidden Wing. Perhaps alarm bells should be raised that on 7 June 2023, Walden was elected to the Aerospace Corporation's Board of Trustees. I often state, individuals within the United States government that operate within UFO legacy programs, within the DoD or IC, often trade in their stars and stripes for a pinstriped suit. I believe this is another instance in which Randall G. Walden continued his work within legacy program operations on the corporate side, this time an FFRDC called the Aerospace Corporation. I would also like to identify and paint one Mr. Edward C. Aldridge as a former very senior, very critical legacy program individual. Aldridge's CV is legendary, rivaled only by Channel Rogues Gallery member Donald M. Kerr. Aldridge served as U.S. Secretary of the Air Force, Director of the NRO, Undersecretary of the Air Force, President of McDonnell Douglas, Senior Manager within LTV Aerospace, an intriguing contractor that would become a CIA shell company called E-Systems that then transitioned under Raytheon, that has started to pop up frequently in my research. And of course, President and CEO of the Aerospace Corporation. I would like to go so far as to say Aldrich is a cornerstone figure to identifying the changing structure of UFO legacy programs that, like I said in the intro, have morphed to enjoy expanded special access program security controls. That in turn has partially led to the siloing of the programs, subject to extreme compartmentalization. Now, if you are here and haven't watched my recent Air Force project, again I strongly recommend stepping back to watch that, as we are about to observe several concepts cross over. Enthralling, I know, but stick with me here. I would like to reference an Air Force historical studies record titled, quote, SAF-AA, A History of the Office of the Administrative Assistant to the Secretary of the Air Force, end quote. If you have seen my Air Force video, you are likely licking your chops right now. But if you haven't, this aforementioned SAF-AA is a critical office I mentioned is involved in senior leadership within Air Force UFO legacy programs. Indeed, in the project, I observed specific offices within the SAF-AA. SAF-AAH, Sensitive Activities, and SAF-AAZ, Security, Special Program Oversight, and Info Protection, and connected these two office heads, Mr. Russell E. Weiler and Mr. William E. McClure, respectively, as the Air Force SES-2 gatekeeper Chris Mellon infamously released in 2024. And let me just say this before we dive in. I am shocked this SAF-AA history appears in an unclassified historical document. Within the document that I am sure many would rather watch paint dry than read, we can find a section titled SAF-AA and quote-unquote outside activities. This section referenced a 2018 interview with retired Administrative Assistant to the Secretary of the Air Force, aka SAF-AA, William A. Davidson. Oh, and by the way, before we continue, Davidson would retire as SAF-AA to move on to the Board of Advisors for Perspecta, a company with ties to Veritas Capital and the Kona Blue Lockheed AWSAT material transfer. Perspecta, alongside Lockheed Martin Enterprise Integration Group, appeared in this context to be ideal corporations for Veritas Capital to acquire to try and slice off its own piece of the pie of UFO programs. And I'll recommend my good friend Rob Jones's excellent piece, Sub Rosa, Organized Secrecy, to learn more there. In this interview, Davidson discussed several quote-unquote outside activities, in which SAF-AA had been and continued to be involved in. Davidson stated there were, quote, several activities that were in other agencies over which the Air Force had administrative control, end quote. Let me just say that again, several activities that existed outside of the Air Force that SAF-AA wielded administrative and operational control over. This is what is known as a cover program. Davison states here, two such programs were started, quote, in Pete Aldrich's day, end quote. Pete Aldrich, of course, is the nickname for Edward C. Aldrich. The quote-unquote outside activities did not show up in mission directives and operated exclusively under the SAF-AA. And the real tipper here that these cover programs are highly likely legacy programs. The fact Davidson stated these programs did not see involvement from SAF-AAZ, the literal compartment under SAF-AA tasked with security, special program oversight, and information protection. So Davidson stating these programs were quote-unquote started in Aldrich's day. Well, I actually believe that is a bit of a misnomer here. These two specific outside activities were started under Aldrich while Edward Aldrich was Undersecretary of the Air Force from 1981 to 1986. Funny enough, Aldrich had additional responsibilities as Undersecaf, including, quote, providing overall direction, guidance, and supervision for Air Force space programs, including launch and on-orbit operations and planning for future space capabilities, end quote. And seeing how Aldrich was also director of the NRO whilst Undersecretary of the Air Force from 1981 to 1986, I think it is a very safe bet to assume these quote-unquote outside activities involved joint Air Force and NRO legacy activities. So you see, these outside activities were not necessarily created during this time epoch, 1981 to 1986. Instead, I believe that with supreme confidence, might I add, we can see a prime example of legacy programs morphing and using cover offices and programs for protection. The late 70s and early 80s were a period of massive Special Access Program reform and security expansion. The expansion of Special Access Programs accelerated drastically in this time period due to the need to compartment information for quote-unquote black programs, involving stealth aircraft, reconnaissance systems, and other high-risk technologies. So if I'm not making myself clear enough, this is directly what I am stating. While Under Secretary of the Air Force from 1981 to 1986, Edward C. Aldrich leveraged expanded Special Access Program security protocols for particularly sensitive information beyond standard top-secret handling, and morphed several cross-department UFO legacy programs to be housed as quote-unquote outside activities under SAF-AA, which served as a cover office. This is why these outside activities existed in other agencies while SAF-AA still had operational and administrative control, while completely bypassing SAF-AAZ as an oversight mechanism. And this is exactly what I spoke about in our intro, that legacy programs have leveraged expanded SAP security mechanisms to morph and enjoy heightened program protection strategies, leading directly to the beyond tangled and complicated web of programs that exist today. And yes, I know this is a very brief investigation into such a critical topic, so one day I will make a full video on the history of legacy as I see it. But I actually believe this thesis of Aldrich and other legacy elements massaging UFO legacy programs to morph and take advantage of expanding SAP security controls can actually connect right back to TRW and my prior work. Again, I stated these legacy reforms likely occurred between 1981 and 1986. Well, what else occurred during this time epoch that we talked about earlier? Yes, the Strategic Defense Initiative, aka Star Wars, aka SDI. As I discussed earlier, this 1983 U.S. research program launched by President Ronald Reagan aimed at developing a multi-layered defense against ballistic missile attacks through technologies including space-based interceptors, directed energy weapons, and advanced sensors.
Weapons that can attack the boost phase and the mid-course have to be able to see their targets. And because of the curve of the Earth, that means being up in space. They also have to be able to attack from hundreds of miles away, which means that whatever they shoot has to get to its target very fast. This is why Star Wars is likely to employ weapons like this: lasers, particle beams, electromagnetic launchers. The first task of the Strategic Defense Initiative is finding out whether weapons like these can indeed be built and made to work.
And as I have stated numerous times, I believe SDI, or Star Wars, as it was nicknamed, featured numerous back-channeled funds towards UFO legacy programs, possibly including funds directed to an alleged Nevada test site clandestine location called the Defense Advanced Research Center, or DARS, and attempted to harness SDI's particle beam weapons programs and lethality and target hardening programs to offensively down UFOs.
An X-ray laser is powerful because at its heart is a hydrogen bomb. As the bomb explodes, a fraction of its enormous power is channeled into focused beams of X-rays, each of which can be pointed at a Soviet booster.
If the above thesis is indeed correct, which I strongly believe it is, 1983 Star Wars saw a massive initiative to fund and equip both new and existing UFO legacy programs. And I can't help but notice the parallel timing of Aldrich and SAF-AA's outside activities, and the Strategic Defense Initiative both taking place during a period of massive Cold War Special Access Program security expansion that I strongly believe was fully taken advantage of by UFO legacy programs. Well, guess what was one of the leading contractors on SDI? And that's right, you can probably guess TRW. Within its acknowledged work on SDI, TRW focused on robust and comprehensive, integrated, space-centric architecture for national security. TRW enjoyed massive contracts with SDI, including a $340.5 million contract for the Brilliant Pebbles Initiative and a $200 million Air Force contract for a compact, space-qualifiable laser. I can't help but wonder if some of these contract vehicles were secretly back-channeled to TRW's work on compartmented UFO legacy programs recently hidden under the SAP-AA. After all, we all famously know misappropriation of funds are indeed a funding mechanism for UFO legacy programs.
Well, so that how does, I don't want to cut you off, but how does a program like that get funded?
I will give you generalities. I can get very specific in a closed session, but misappropriation of funds and
does that mean
self-fund.
does that mean that there is money in the budget that is set to go to a program, but it doesn't, and it goes to something else?
Yes, I have specific knowledge of that. Yep.
Do you think U.S. corporations are overcharging for certain tech they're selling to the U.S. government, and that additional money is going to programs?
Correct, through something called IRAD.
But how interesting is it that just a few years after Aldrich served as Undersecretary of the Air Force and Secretary of the Air Force, he would become the Aerospace Corporation's CEO for nearly 10 years. Walden and Aldrich. I believe both of these men served very senior UFO legacy program roles within an Air Force capacity. And I cannot help but to notice a pattern here that both went on to executive roles at the Aerospace Corporation. High-level figures within the US DoD/IC, who also served senior roles within TRW, have been accused of serving as top brass within UFO legacy programs for decades. From crash retrieval witnesses mustering the courage to speak in the 1970s, up to today in 2026, these patterns are undeniable, and of course, we must investigate. Indeed, I personally vehemently believe from the 1950s up until today, select TRW personnel have played a very major factor in shaping and overseeing Northrop Grumman's role within UFO legacy programs from a DoD/IC oversight level.
As I understand it, Fritz, you were working for the United States Air Force.
The story began late one night in 1953 at Frenchman's Flat, Nevada. The man had been working as a consultant on blast effects of atom bombs when he was suddenly ordered to report for a new mission.
What happened after that? We were put on a bus, which the windows were all completely covered with curtains and, in some cases, black paper taped to the windows. And we're driven for 3 or 4 hours, and we're not sure just where we were going. Several of us tried to guess where we might have been. We, at that time, came to the conclusion it was in the area of Kingman, Arizona.
Viewers of my channel will recall the 1953 Kingman, Arizona crash retrieval case. That is one of my all-time favorite cases, and in my opinion, a very real instance of a crashed non-human technical vehicle with on-board biologics. I have said several times lately that I would like to revisit the Kingman case, but ultimately, I am waiting for a few more pieces to come together before another 2+ hour exploration. But let's briefly revisit this case here. Arthur Stansel Jr. serves as the primary witness for the Kingman crash. In 1973, Stansel would disclose his encounter to UFO researcher Raymond Fowler, and even sign an affidavit swearing his testimony as true, in which Fowler referenced Stansel as the pseudonym Fritz Warner. In short, Stansel claimed in the spring of 1953 he served as an engineer connected with the Operation Upshot Knothole nuclear tests that were conducted at the nuclear test site in Nevada. This aspect of Stansel's testimony is an established fact, as we can both observe Stansel listed as an employed engineer under the mechanical branch of the Air Research and Development Command, ARDC, out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, with a specialty in alighting devices and landing gear. Indeed, Stansel can be found in the official Armed Forces Special Weapons Project Upshot Knothole documents as personnel within this special studies section out of Air Materiel Command, requested by Air Research and Development Command. If you don't recognize Air Materiel Command and Air Research and Development Command, ARDC, that's no problem. However, I do again recommend watching my Air Force project to learn how these specific former Air Force major commands connect to the UFO Legacy Program operations of today and the Kingman crash. In short, Stansel claimed in his affidavit, on 21 May 1953, he was summoned to assist in the investigation of a crashed unknown object in the vicinity of Kingman, Arizona. After being bussed in on a large bus with blacked-out windows, Stansel observed two large floodlights illuminating a crashed vehicle that was roughly 30 feet in diameter and oval-shaped, constructed of an unfamiliar metal that resembled brushed aluminum.
There was also a tent, which I didn't get to look into, but one fellow whom I did happen to talk with briefly until they told us to stop talking, said that he had seen two bodies inside this tent, two alien-looking bodies. It was brown, leathery skin, had a silver, like a cap on, without a bill.
Like a skull cap?
Yes, like a skull cap.
Again, the Kingman story is so fascinating, and a crash retrieval I consider very real, so please look forward to me covering it once again. Stansel would include several names within his testimony, including the illustrious Dr. Eric Henry Wang as a UFO crash retrieval reverse engineering team lead. Wang was a figure we discussed and uncovered new revelations on at length in my Air Force project. Stansel would go on to state he was summoned to the crash site by one Dr. Ed Dahl, who would tell Stansel he would, quote, go on a special job, end quote. In Stansel's own diary dated 20 May 1953, he would write, quote, spent most of the day on Frenchman's Flat, surveying cubicles and supervising welding of plate grider bridge sensors, which cracked after last shot. Drank brew in Eve, Reed. Got funny call from Dr. Dahl about 1000. I'm going on a special job tomorrow, end quote. I have always found it intriguing Dr. Ed Dahl as the man who coordinated personnel and engineers like Stansel to the Kingman crash site ultimately got very little exposure in the case, whilst figures like Wang drew great interest from the public. After all, both of these men were labeled by Stansel as imperative to the UFO crash retrieval and reverse engineering effort. Researcher Raymond Fowler even attempted to track down Dahl with little to no success, while figures like Bill Moore, who admitted to operating within UFO circles on behalf of the intelligence community, seemingly ran interference against Fowler, contacting Dahl himself. So why don't we investigate this enigmatic figure? Dr. Edward Bushnell Dahl lived from 1912 to 1998. Dr. Dahl earned his PhD in electrical engineering before serving a critical role on the Manhattan Project's Project Alberta, a section of the Manhattan Project that operated a threefold mission: the design, procurement, and assembly of an atomic bomb shape for delivery by air to be dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That is roughly where easily accessible knowledge on Dahl stops. But by piecing together newspaper clippings and print articles on Dahl from his lifetime, we can learn so much more. Following the Manhattan Project, Dahl became the chairman of the physics department at Stanford University and a senior member of the Stanford Research Institute, also known as SRI International. Today, SRI performs client-sponsored research and development for government agencies amongst other ventures and is truly infamous in UFO lore. Stanford Research Institute was named as a critical research pillar in T. Townsend Brown's 1952 proposed Project Winter Haven that explored long-range practical applications of electrogravitics, and I know Jesse Michaels is punching the air right now. SRI International also served as the primary research institution behind the Stargate Project, a multi-agency project that utilized multiple program names to explore psychic phenomena, especially for military applications. This psychic program was majorly directed by super spook Hal Puthoff, and of course in the early 1990s, this research was handed over and continued by SAIC, or Science Applications International Corporation. Whenever I hear about the CIA and other agencies' sudden interest and mobilization into psychic phenomena, I can't help but to think back to this David Grush quote.
Well, there was like CIA docs about consciousness and like weird remote viewing stuff. I mean, besides the Stargate program that were released in the FOIA reading room on CIA's website too, that are pretty trippy. We're like, wow, CIA's looking into some really interesting stuff. I mean, they're a hardcore intel agency. What's going on there? So,
but it makes sense that they would kind of have to find out if that's or not. Like, you can't ignore that if you're really doing your job. If your job is intelligence, like, okay, like, let's look at this.
Or it's an aspect of the phenomenon because it's like a reach out from the crash retrieval program. Like, hey, I need you to look into some weird stuff because it might be the key unlock for something that we got in a warehouse, you know?
Yeah.
So,
whoa.
Anyways, we can see on 27 March 1953, just 2 months before the Kingman crash, Stanford Research Institute, aka SRI International, supplied key scientific assistance for the upcoming spring atomic tests. And who else but Dr. Ed Dahl was tasked with serving as director of a military effects group for this series of tests, Operation Upshot Knothole, of course, a joint DoD and Atomic Energy Commission test organization. In 1959, we can learn quite a bit more about Dahl. Dr. Dahl served as technical director for 2 major special weapons programs for the Armed Forces Special Weapons Project, or AFSWP. And if you have heard of AFSWP before, you may be thinking back to my Sandia project. Indeed, within January of 1957, 29 January 1957 to be exact, U.S. Secretary of War Robert P. Patterson and Secretary of the Navy, original accused MJ-12 member and likely murder victim James V. Forrestal, established the Armed Forces Special Weapons Project, or AFSWP, a joint Army and Navy venture to manage nuclear weapons. AFSWP and Los Alamos Sea Division established operations at Sandia Base. AFSWP was also named as a critical UFO crash retrieval response element outlined in the disputed Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit documents. Alas, in the Sandia project of mine, I discussed AFSWP's long evolution into DTRA, or the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, and actually connected this evolution to the testimony of Dylan Borland. On Weaponized Podcast, Borland referenced DTRA as containing old Atomic Energy Commission UFO files that concluded some UFOs were extraterrestrial. I wonder if Dahl and Kingman were included in these files.
When Congress passed the archives legislation where all the agencies were supposed to round up all their documents, I had a wonderful conversation on my last day, and I'm sure it was just coincidental. The person in charge of collecting all of the information from DTRA dealing with extraterrestrials and, as he put it, quote unquote, little green men, happened to sit next to me at my computer terminal and began pulling all of the documents on my system and the systems in our SCIF. Interesting fact for you was that he came into the old atomic energy documents from way back when, and there was intelligence and information in those that discuss what you said, which is this has been around with them, and that even back then they had a similar outlook that this isn't exactly for our benefit.
So even outside of Stansel naming Dahl as a pivotal figure in Kingman, he is already connected to several institutions implicated in UFO legacy programs. In 1959, we can also learn that Dr. Dahl was elected vice president of the Space Technology Laboratories after joining STL in 1955. Remember that STL was a subsidiary and shortly later division within TRW that would lend personnel to the spin-off of the AEROSPACE Corporation. By 1966, Dahl was promoted to senior vice president within TRW Systems Group, the renamed TRW division that was once Space Technology Laboratories. TRW Systems Group spearheaded TRW's entire electronics and defense sector and was instrumental in the development of U.S. ballistic missiles, aka ICBMs, and spacecraft for the U.S. space race, including designing and developing the Apollo 11 lunar module. By 1971, Dahl integrated into TRW's corporate side as a Group Assistant General Manager. This position Dahl held until 1977, where he retired from TRW as Executive Vice President for TRW Systems Group. Of course, if you haven't guessed by now, I vehemently believe TRW was instrumental in UFO Legacy Program operations. But for the sake of specificity, one must ask here. This TRW Systems Group, formerly TRW's Space Technology Laboratories, in which Dahl served as Senior Vice President, that was so instrumental to NASA and the Atlas and Titan missile programs. Did Systems Group within TRW engage with UFO legacy activities? Well, of course, I certainly believe so, and like everything I discuss on this channel, we shouldn't be able to look at the surface of TRW, or any agency or entity for that matter, and see the face of UFO legacy programs. Like the Air Force, NRO, or any major contractor, TRW was divided into numerous organizational pieces, and TRW Systems Group was no exception. TRW Systems Group was comprised of 3 key units: Space and Electronics, which produced spacecraft systems, high-energy lasers, avionics, electro-optical and instrumentation systems, and telecommunication systems. And Systems, which provided systems engineering and integration, information technology solutions, and command, control, and communication systems. Of course, both of these entities are now part of Northrop Grumman, but TRW Systems Group last major unit, Aeronautics, is now owned by Raytheon. Systems Group was divided into several further sub-organizations of interest to us, and these include Systems Engineering and Integration Division that did plenty of contracting with the CIA, including work on the SAFE project, Space Vehicles Division, Systems Laboratories, and of course, it should come as no surprise, Special Projects. Led at the time of this appendix on screen, 1965, by TRW Chief Scientist Bill Carson, TRW Systems Group Special Projects was instrumental for the development of NRO Program B's SIGINT, or Signals Intelligence Satellites. NRO Program B I covered at length within my NRO project. Program B saw joint NRO and CIA Directorate of Science and Technology coordination on DS&T's satellite reconnaissance elements. The ground element of this project to this day is stationed at Pine Gap, Australia, that some refer to as the Aussies Area 51. From 1982 to 1989, the director of NRO Program B was one Mr. R. Everett Heinemann, who was infamously named by Admiral Bobby Ray Inman to NASA mission specialist Bob Eschler as the guy to speak to regarding UFO crash retrieval teams, and more on him later. Special Projects and TRW Systems Group at large was involved in endless classified programs, including designing and building Defense Support Program or DSP satellites, which I have actually connected to both observing UFOs in the past, as well as connected the Defense Support Program, or again DSP, to the testimony of Lance Corporal Jonathan Wegant and DOE NEST UFO crash retrieval teams. I am utterly fascinated by what other revelations Dr. Dahl and TRW Systems Group may hold.
3 decades ago, when I was new to the intelligence community, I don't think this is something that I could have imagined myself doing. When I started out in the IC, I literally did not know what to expect. After college, as a freshly minted engineer, I left the Midwest for the more exciting and professionally promising East Coast. I didn't have much money or any income, so my parents let me stay with them on their live-aboard boat in Annapolis while I looked for a job. It's a good plan. I saw an ad for an ocean engineer at TRW, the company that was later bought by Northrop Grumman. The ad was remarkably short on any details, but I thought, I'm an engineer and I live on a boat, so I've got this ocean engineering thing covered. And that's how my career in the IC started, as an engineer designing high-tech and highly classified systems for the Navy.
I would now like to shift focus to David Grush's recent legendary interview with Megyn Kelly. To hear Grush speak publicly is a rare treat, and this sub-15-minute interview is really no exception. But like I have said with every single Grush appearance, if we listen in closely, there is so much actionable data delivered in a small package, and again, this interview is no exception. After the bold and brazen attempts for retired Air Force Lieutenant General, former Director of National Intelligence, Director of the DIA, and Director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, USDINS, James Clapper, to appear on the Age of Disclosure documentary alongside his good friend Luis Elizondo, Grush said this on Kelly.
And I did want to point out General Clapper, the former DNI, in the documentary. I certainly applaud him for at least speaking out in general. He goes on, I believe, I've only seen clips of Age of Disclosure, not the whole thing, where there was a program when he was the Director of National Intelligence where they were tracking these vehicles over Area 51, of course, the famed classified test location. And I'm a little bit disappointed as a fellow Air Force officer, and certainly General Clapper rose to the ranks as 3-star general. That's all he said in the documentary, that was a program he was aware of. In fact, without being inappropriate, I will say that General Clapper was well aware of the crash retrieval issue, managed the crash retrieval issue, and when he was the DNI, USDI, and DIA director, he placed people in critical roles to manage this issue, both publicly and I'll just say non-publicly as well. And I'll allow the audience distill what I'm saying at the risk of being inappropriate or going too far with my discussion. So General Clapper, Stephanie O'Sullivan, other folks in the IC that are well aware of this issue, that were in rooms discussing this issue, I ask you to be greater leaders on this. I should not be the only former military officer and intelligence official that is being completely candid with the information that they were exposed to. So perhaps
once again, James Clapper understates what he knows and what he's done.
Well, I am exactly the audience that will distill what Grush was saying there. Grush called for Clapper, Stephanie O'Sullivan, and hypothetically, allegedly, in my opinion, Luis Elizondo, to come forward and be transparent with their exposure and involvement in UFO legacy activities. Indeed, Grush outright stated Clapper managed the UFO crash retrieval issue with the support of his underlings, including Stephanie O'Sullivan. To recall my point with Elizondo, I believe Clapper, O'Sullivan, and Elizondo were involved in an Obama administration effort to establish an incoming political candidate as the quote-unquote disclosure president, as Grush spoke on in this interview. And yes, of course, that candidate would have been Hillary Clinton.
Unfortunately, this subject has been a victim of a lot of, I'll call it domestic information operations, something I discussed initially publicly in 2023. And there's certainly been this Game of Thrones activity with multiple factions of the deep state in a bipartisan manner. The Republicans and the Democrats are both guilty. And even in a recent previous administration, in the Obama administration, there was certainly actions taken strategically to help a particular presidential candidate, possibly if this subject were to become normalized and they got elected president. So there's been a lot of gamesmanship and a lot of, I'll call it house of cards type activities in the past.
But the fake ATIP cover program is not the topic of today. So let's narrow in on one Mrs. Stephanie O'Sullivan.
I had the good fortune of being there a long time, along with my superb deputy, Stephanie O'Sullivan, very accomplished senior from CIA.
Clapper's protege served as Principal Deputy Director for National Intelligence from 2011 to 2017, where O'Sullivan managed day-to-day operations of the intelligence community, assisting the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper.
Intelligence integration is the prerequisite for reaching the 9/11 Commission's goal that we act as a community. For me, after 30 years of work at TRW, with the Office of Naval Intelligence and in CIA, I saw just how important it was that we get this right. So I jumped at the chance to be at the center of that work and to work for Jim Clapper. He is probably the most selfless leader that I've ever worked with, and I've worked with some real legends. That's a somewhat unique path that I've taken to be standing here today. So, just to be clear and to set expectations, I need to make one point about the 3.5 decades of work that I just covered. I've worked on the design and deployment of some pretty amazing systems and led teams that put incredible technology into operations.
Now, I cannot speak for Grush here, but I do not think, nor do I think he thinks for a single second, every single director of national intelligence and their PDD&I, currently Tulsi Gabbard and Aaron Lucas, serves senior roles within UFO legacy programs. No, indeed, I believe, as I would wager David Grush does too, but again, I do not speak for him. Both Clapper and O'Sullivan had prior exposure and need-to-know access in the programs before serving senior roles within the OD&I. I believe Clapper specifically recruited O'Sullivan as his PDD&I to wield dual-hatted roles together, senior OD&I personnel and senior legacy program personnel. I mean, in 2011, according to congressional record, it was a, quote, significant and welcome development, end quote, that Clapper personally recommended President Obama nominate O'Sullivan for PDD&I. I will go so far as to say Clapper is likely the closest thing legacy programs have had as a singular controlling figure since Dick Cheney left in 2009. Clapper and O'Sullivan's roles within legacy programs cannot be understated. And don't take my word here, listen back to David Grush. Prior to PDD&I, O'Sullivan served as Deputy Director of the CIA and Deputy Director of CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology, aka DS&T, for 4 years. And by this point it goes without saying, but as I have discussed numerous times, the CIA DS&T Deputy Director is a significant figure within the UFO Legacy Program structure. Former Deputy Directors I have spoken on include Doug Wolf, Glenn Gaffney, and Don Meyerix. Please enjoy my NRO project to learn more about each of these individuals and CIA DS&T's critical alleged involvement in NRO legacy programs. And remember that name Doug Wolf. He's not a nice guy. In this project earlier, we discussed Edward C. Aldridge of the Aerospace Corporation and under SECAF and SECAF, and compared his legendary CV to Donald Kerr's. O'Sullivan's CV is the only one that comes close to these two gentlemen. And this is outside of her position as PDD&I, CIA Deputy Director and CIA DS&T Deputy Director. Perhaps then, it should come as no surprise, O'Sullivan joined the board of the Aerospace Corporation in 2017 to lend a, quote, wealth of knowledge and technical expertise from the intelligence community as well as the military and aerospace sectors, end quote. By 2021, up until present, O'Sullivan has served as the chairman of the Aerospace Corporation. Oh, but that's not all, and far from it. Stephanie O'Sullivan also serves on the board of directors of Battelle Memorial Institute, a channel regular and likely UFO Legacy Program contractor since at least the late 1940s. O'Sullivan also serves on the board of directors for Booz Allen Hamilton, another channel regular, and Huntington Ingalls Industrials, a contractor spun off from Northrop Grumman in 2011. That is the largest military shipbuilding company in the entire United States. O'Sullivan additionally formerly served on the board of advisors for Oak Ridge National Labs, a DOE and NNSA-sponsored FFRDC national lab that Sean Kirkpatrick ran off to post-AERO, and a national lab I have discussed amongst the larger Y-12 complex, as housing a vast underground facility studying the quote-unquote skin of recovered UFOs. Exhausted yet with O'Sullivan? I hope not, because we're going to keep going. The former PDD&I also serves on the board of trustees for IQT, aka In-Q-Tel. In-Q-Tel is better known as the CIA's venture capital firm, quote, incorporated in February 1999. after congressional approval of a CIA proposal to spread the insertion of mature technologies, support rapid development of mission-critical applications, and enhance the CIA's ability to attract the skills and expertise vital to its success." End quote. Take a moment to guess who O'Sullivan's co-worker was at an executive level at In-Q-Tel. Well, that would be ex-executive vice president and senior fellow for In-Q-Tel, and former CIA DS&T deputy director himself, the infamous Glenn Gaffney. To say Gaffney is infamous in UFO lore is an understatement. Gaffney's claim to fame is shutting down the late 2000s Kona Blue PSAP, or Prospective Special Access Program UFO Material Transfer, that was supposed to be conducted between Lockheed Martin and the OSAP program and Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, or BASS. Very intriguing to see both O'Sullivan and Gaffney, who both held the position of CIA DS&T Deputy Director, end up together at an executive level at In-Q-Tel. Lastly, around 2018, O'Sullivan joined the board of Peraton. Peraton houses the former Lockheed Martin Enterprise Integration Group, which held much of Lockheed Martin's black programs. And Peraton purchased Northrop Grumman's federal IT and mission support services for $3.4 billion in 2021. My good friend Rob Jones has written an excellent piece on how Veritas Capital, through Peraton, attempted to slice off a piece of its own legacy program pie and procure the Kona Blue UFO materials mentioned above through a series of complex personnel and company acquisitions. Indeed, O'Sullivan shares Peraton's board with former NGA Director Robert Cardillo, a man who Rob Jones has wagered and a man that I am certain was involved in blocking Lockheed Martin from divesting itself of UFO materials to OSAP. Okay, following CIA Deputy Director, DS&T Deputy Director, and PDD&I, we see HII, Oak Ridge National Labs, Peraton, In-Q-Tel, AEROSPACE, Battelle Memorial Institute, and Booz Allen Hamilton on O'Sullivan's CV. Now, let's see what she did before these positions. Stephanie's career seems to be largely data masked before joining the CIA in 1995. By data masking here, I mean the explicit definition of the process of obscuring, anonymizing, or pseudonymizing sensitive, classified, or personally identifiable information for public and unclassified consumption. I have seen the application of data masking many times before, specifically surrounding figures involved in the hidden wing I outlined in my Air Force Legacy Programs video. Such data masking can be as simple as excluding positions and work history on an individual CV, or using a corporate or USG position as cover for intelligence agency and clandestine work. That second application can be thought of as similar to a CIA NOC, or non-official cover. I believe examples can be seen in the history of Don Meyerix, an individual I have targeted as a senior legacy program individual. Like O'Sullivan, Meyerix has also served as CIA DS&T Deputy Director. And additionally, from 2009 to 2013, Meyerix served under Clapper and O'Sullivan as ADNI ATNF, or Assistant Deputy Director for National Intelligence for Acquisition, Technologies, and Facilities, a position that alongside its DoD counterpart, the USD ANS, or Undersecretary for Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, harnesses administrative and operational control over NRO acquisition programs. I believe data masking can be found in Meyerix's work as a senior VP for AOL, transitioning into her own consulting LLC, then immediately jumping into work as ADNI ATNF, a very high position within the IC that I believe is imperative to UFO legacy activity oversight. It is a possibility Meyerix's CV leaves out her exposure to clandestine exotic USAPs pre-ADNI ATNF, just as it is possible Meyerix's former corporate position was interwoven with CIA. After all, post-ADNI ATNF, Meyerix leapfrogged once again, this time into the role of CIA DS&T Deputy Director for nearly 9 years. I think both possibilities here with Meyerix are feasible. And of course, there is someone that ran a parallel track to Meyerix. someone Myrick's worked alongside when she was technical staff in the early 1980s at where else but TRW, Stephanie O'Sullivan. As I said, O'Sullivan's CV from 1982 to 1985 is very sparse bar places of work. Thus, I theorize her true work was indeed data masked. You can find almost nothing about O'Sullivan's work at TRW online besides a few tiny mentions. According to a 2018 Missouri Science and Technology article titled, quote, Stephanie O'Sullivan, Life After Intelligence, end quote, the former accomplished PDD&I joined TRW around 1982. Seen as Myrick's worked at TRW from 1981 to 1993, yes, the two had 2 years of overlap. We can find nothing else, bar some intriguing information from O'Sullivan's board description for Battelle Memorial Institute. Here we can learn that O'Sullivan served in an oversight role for TRW, directing a, quote, series of sensitive projects for TRW, end quote. That's it, nothing else. All we know is that from 1982 to 1995, O'Sullivan worked in sensitive projects for TRW and served in the Office of Naval Intelligence, or ONI, on sensitive research and development programs. Office of Naval Intelligence? Yes, of course, go watch my naval project to learn more. And you know who else was in ONI? That's right, Jay Stratton. Someone ought to ask Jay Stratton why David Grush had to discuss O'Sullivan before Stratton did. Better yet, someone should ask Stratton why the ONI and Navy at large were excluded from the Age of Disclosure's false legacy program outline. Lastly, I want to cover one more figure that I believe shaped the direction of TRW's legacy program efforts and continued this clandestine work within Northrop Grumman into the late 2000s. Perhaps this last figure can bridge us towards analyzing TRW's scandals and Northrop's buyout of TRW in the early 2000s, that I believe are hallmark to understanding Northrop's involvement in legacy operations today. Meet Richard L. Haver, who joined TRW in 1999 as Vice President and Director for Intelligence Programs, and retired from Northrop Grumman in 2010 as Vice President for Intelligence Programs. A labeled protege of Vice President Dick Cheney, I find Haver's career history and relationships prior to TRW and Northrop Grumman rather intriguing. But for a quick reference, VP for Intelligence Programs at Northrop Grumman/TRW is a mere role to Lockheed Martin's VP position for Intelligence Programs. This Lockheed position was formerly held by Miss Mary Kay Sturtevant, who additionally served as Lockheed Martin VP for Government Affairs. I have talked about Sturtevant so much and understand due to her agency ties, specifically CIA DS&T, and exposure to UFO legacy programs, Sturtevant liaised between Lockheed Martin's Jim Ryder and CIA DS&T Deputy Director Glenn Gaffney when Ryder wished to divest UFO materials through the Kona Blue PSAP. Therefore, I find great value in exploring the same VP position in a rival prime contractor, Northrop Grumman, that has an equally impressive background to Sturtevant. Haver served a tremendous career within the U.S. Navy, climbing the ranks from active duty to a civilian intelligence analyst in the Anti-Submarine Warfare Systems branch at the Naval Intelligence Support Center, to eventually serving as Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence from 1985 to 1989. And it is highly likely whilst Deputy Director within ONI, Haver and O'Sullivan crossed paths. Interesting to me, Dick Cheney himself, in Dave Grush's words, Darth Vader, hand-selected Haver in 1989 to the position of Assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Intelligence Policy. This assistant to the SecDef position was a newly created position by Cheney to allow Haver to serve as Cheney's special aide with broad authority over military intelligence policy. Indeed, in this position, Haver reviewed DoD intelligence, counterintelligence, security, and covert action activities, as well as monitored intelligence policy and made recommendations to the Defense Secretary and others for necessary changes in intelligence programs. I also find it rather intriguing, this Special Assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Intelligence Policy position created by Cheney was also held from 1997 to 1998 by Christopher Mellon, a man whom I do not believe has been completely forthcoming on his exposure/knowledge regarding UFO legacy activities. Seen as Cheney operated as the head of the snake for UFO legacy programs whilst VP for George Bush from 2001 to 2009, and likely served the same role years prior when Secretary of Defense from 1989 to 1993, I am willing to make a strong wager that Haver, as Cheney's special aide with intimate access into clandestine intelligence programs, was a critical member in Cheney's inner circle of legacy activity personnel. From 1992 to 1995, Haver would then serve as the Executive Director for Intelligence Community Affairs, and in 1998, he would assume the duties of Chief of Staff of the National Intelligence Council and Deputy to the Assistant Director of Central Intelligence for Analysis and Production. By 1999, Haver would move on to TRW and thus on to Northrop Grumman. However, I can't just state enough how intriguing it is that Dick Cheney, the last man to rule the UFO Legacy Program portfolio with an iron fist, handpicked Haver for high-level intelligence matters. Indeed, whilst spearheading business development for TRW's intelligence activities under their Systems and Information Technology Group and Space and Electronics Group, Haver was again selected by then Vice President Dick Cheney in the early 2000s to head the administration's transition team for intelligence, and then selected by Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld as the Special Assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. So yeah, during his tenure in TRW and Northrop Grumman, Haver was handpicked again by Darth Vader himself and Donald Rumsfeld to assist with extremely senior intelligence matters. There are no direct links between Haver and UFO legacy programs, but from ONI to TRW to Northrop Grumman to Dick Cheney, I think an extremely strong argument can be made. So you see, I believe an individual like Dr. Ed Dahl used his expertise in legacy program operations while performing UFO retrieval and reverse engineering operations for Joint Atomic Energy Commission and Department of Defense task forces, and continued this work in the private sector for TRW Systems Group from 1955 to 1977. And on the other side of the same coin, someone like Stephanie O'Sullivan was exposed to UFO legacy programs in her weird data-masked, quote, oversight for a series of sensitive projects for TRW, end quote, role that began in the early 1980s, and continued this work as PDD&I under James Clapper for legacy programs. And in a similar vein, we have Richard Haver, who served very senior roles within the ONI and intelligence community, before serving as a senior VP within TRW and Northrop Grumman, where in the midst of his corporate service, he was handpicked by VP Dick Cheney to help with intelligence transition for the new administration. Remember that all of this is now owned by Northrop Grumman. Whatever secret legacy information, materials, and projects Dr. Dahl took to TRW Systems Group, and whatever legacy exposure Stephanie O'Sullivan took with her from TRW to ONI to agency to eventually PDD&I to serve in legacy programs under Clapper, all of it owned by Northrop Grumman, now in its Mission Systems and Space Systems division. A reoccurring subject of my channel is to investigate funding mechanisms for UFO legacy program activities. After all, according to the excellent work of Catherine Austin Fitts, we are likely looking at figures in the trillions of US dollars, up to 21 trillion in fact, from just 1995 to 2015, funneled away to the US black budget, specifically, according to Fitts, to quote-unquote clandestine military research and development. Indeed, in her 2004 paper titled The Black Budget of the United States, former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Catherine Austin Fitts would write, quote, "Large proportion of the nation's wealth is being illegally diverted into secret, unaccountable channels to support clandestine domestic military R&D," end quote. According to David Grush's 2023 sworn testimony, a primary funding mechanism for UFO legacy programs is misappropriation of funds.
Well, so that how does, I mean, I don't want to cut you off, but how does a program like that get funded?
I will give you generalities. I can get very specific in a closed session, but misappropriation of funds.
Indeed, I've explored several avenues of misappropriation of funds I wager connect directly to UFO legacy programs, including massive scandals surrounding the National Reconnaissance Office and quote-unquote rampant mismanagement of funds, including carryover appropriations, also known as forward funding, that occurred in the early 1990s when the NRO was officially declassified. Carryover appropriations are unobligated or unspent funds left over from a previous budget period that are carried forward and used in a future budget period to cover costs for the same or other projects. In my Naval Programs video, I have also explored various contractors, including the Grumman Corporation pre-merger, overcharging for simple parts like socket wrenches or ashtrays that may be connected to legacy funding. Indeed, in private settings, I have also been exposed to several further funding schemes, including literal cash transactions. In that sworn testimony, under questions prompted by Representative Moskowitz, Grush went on to say this.
Does that mean that there is money in the budget that is said to go to a program, but it doesn't, and it goes to something else?
Yes, I have specific knowledge of that. Yep.
Do you think U.S. corporations are overcharging for certain tech they're selling to the U.S. government, and that additional money is going to programs?
Correct, through something called IRAD.
And I have discussed IRAD, or Independent Research and Development, before, specifically in my Lockheed project. So let's quickly recap before expanding significantly on this concept. What is IRAD, mentioned by David Grush here? IRAD is a technical research and development effort by industry that is not sponsored by or required in performance of a contract. Such projects consist within basic R&D, applied R&D, development, and system and other concept formulation studies. Quote, contractors can recover a portion of their IRAD costs by including them as an allowable indirect expense on government contracts, to the extent that those costs are allocable and reasonable. In addition, DoD permits major defense contractors to include allowable IRAD costs as indirect expenses on defense contracts, to the extent that the IRAD activities are potentially of interest to DoD, end quote. In more simple term, IRAD consists of R&D activities conducted by private contractors that have potential interest to the DoD. So essentially, Lockheed, Boeing, Northrop, Raytheon, General Dynamics get to do whatever they want and build the DoD for it. In the realm of UFO legacy activities, this allows Lockheed Martin, or Northrop Grumman for example, to freely pursue classified operations without traditional DoD oversight and bill the DoD for such work. Notice though that I said traditional channels. I strongly believe though prime contractors hide UFO funds through IRAD, almost all contractors still adhere to my UFO Legacy Program framework and operate such work under DoD Special Access Programs or Intelligence Community Controlled Access Programs, under strict oversight of elements of the DoD, IC, and R&D Masters Federally Funded Research and Development Centers, or FFRDCs. Indeed, in 2023, 2022, and 2021, Northrop Grumman's IRAD expenses totaled $1.2 billion, $1.2 billion again, and $1.1 billion respectively, $3.5 billion US in 3 years. But for actionable information, I have no interest in current IRAD costs. No, instead, I am interested to evaluate both Northrop Grumman and TRW's IRAD expenses in the late 90s and early 2000s. Remember what I said about David Grush's rare media appearances. If we listen closely, we can learn so much.
Early on the global war on terror, a lot of the money that was initially given to these companies was essentially reallocated for overseas contingency operations. And these contractors essentially started to do their own thing, if you will, something called IRAD, Internal Research and Development. And Privately, they continued certain things that actually the government was trying to cancel as it relates to the subject, and they went off and retrieved and exploited things essentially on their own and only loosely accountable back to their government handlers.
Let me just go ahead and say that again plainly. David Grush states some contractors in the onset of the global war on terror began using IRAD to do their own thing, retrieving and exploiting UFOs on their own, breaking away and staying only loosely accountable to their government handlers. At first glance here, you may think Grush's comments conflict greatly with the UFO Legacy Program outline I propose, in which defense industrial base prime contractors operate at the bottom of the organizational pyramid, with only select need-to-know personnel like SAP security directors and corporate directors for special programs and other specific senior executives read in. I still vehemently maintain this structure is indeed true. In fact, I will go so far as to state David Grush isn't stating all contractors used IRAD to kickstart their own UFO crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs. But indeed, a few specific contractors did this. And I believe the biggest contractor to build their own unaccountable set of legacy activities is Northrop Grumman. I always found it strange. Over the past 2 years, I have met with and spoken to nearly a dozen individuals who claim to have worked and I believe have worked firsthand within UFO Legacy Program operations. These individuals often name the FFRDCs, pretty much always MITRE as one, and prime contractors attached to the programs in an RDT&E capacity. And these almost always include Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, and occasionally General Dynamics. Northrop Grumman is also mentioned by these individuals, but often as an outlier or in a capacity removed from other prime contractors. Indeed, in my last project, I outlined the Hidden Wing, a massive set of programs conducted on the Western Ranges, including the Edwards 412th Test Wing, Nevada Test and Training Range, and Utah Test and Training Range, that operates under Air Force Test and Evaluation, or AFTE, to perform test and evaluation on recovered non-human vehicles that humans have found a way to interface with, as well as alien reproduction vehicles and airframes harnessing derivative technologies of unknown origin. After speaking to individuals who stood in the electromagnetically sealed test chamber that held recovered non-human craft, I learned that principal engineers operated on site, mostly hailing from Lockheed Martin and Boeing. Indeed, according to my Hidden Wing understanding, many man-made derivative vehicles were physically driven in from Air Force Plant 42, that of course houses Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Northrop Grumman within its GOCO or government-owned contractor-operated institution. In a similar vein, I am aware of a major U.S. Army initiative in the early 2000s that sought to adapt non-human technology to air and ground vehicles to strengthen the U.S. warfighter. Boeing operated as a primary contractor project manager for this program, with Lockheed and other contractors such as SAIC engaged with the effort. Both the Hidden Wing and Army initiative, what is largely missing as a major principal contractor? Yes, Northrop Grumman. This isn't to say Northrop isn't involved, quite the opposite in fact. I believe Northrop Grumman is the prime contractor most involved with clandestine UFO retrieval and reverse engineering operations. I say this to theorize that Northrop Grumman may be the rare exception here that seized an opportunity in the early 2000s to operate outside of the strict legacy chain of command, with loose affiliations to agency and their government handlers. Me personally, I view Northrop Grumman as a terrifying entity when it comes to legacy activities. And somehow, Northrop has managed to recruit alleged monsters to staff their special program security teams, including Terry Phillips and some others who aren't necessarily monsters we will explore soon. And I feel this way because I believe Northrop's expanded freedoms within the programs sees aggressive program protection strategies by the contractor. I would wager there are others with first-hand experience watching this video right now that strongly agree with my thesis here. But this statement regarding Northrop harnessing IRAD to seize their own slice of the legacy pie. What if we had some tangible data to work with regarding Northrop Grumman and TRW? And what if TRW had proven instances of misappropriation of funds through IRAD around this time of interest?
A good idea by itself may go nowhere. It needs other good ideas. Technology from a company called TRW makes the most of ideas by helping them work together. And working together is the best idea in the world. Tomorrow is taking shape at a company called TRW.
The U.S. global war on terror began following September 11, 2001. Therefore, let us investigate plus and minus a handful of years to find interesting information regarding TRW and Northrop Grumman's IRAD activities, and U.S. government-wide IRAD trends. Assessing reports from the University of Maryland, published in 2015, we can see from 2000 to 2005, yearly IRAD spending increased 26%, from around $3 billion a year to $3.8 billion a year. Though this should not come as a surprise, seeing as spending and the amount of money in contractor pockets goes way up while the U.S. engages in war, and the war on terror was no exception. According to a 2002 DoD report titled DoD Independent Research and Development Program Report, we can observe that in the fiscal year of 2000, thousands of IRAD programs were in existence, costing approximately $3 billion annually. Here we can learn that thanks to sweeping DoD changes enacted in 1991, contractors went from being required to submit IRAD plans for DoD review and approval, with spending ceilings established on the amount of IRAD costs that each contractor could recover as indirect expenses under defense contracts, to contractors enjoying the option to operate without DoD approval requirements and reimbursement ceilings. Indeed, whilst most contractors, according to this document, reported IRAD plans and accomplishments to DoD to advertise technical capabilities to potential DoD customers, they were not required to do so. Therefore, we can crunch some interesting numbers here. Spending on IRAD projects covered by summaries submitted to DTIC, or the Defense Technical Intelligence Center in 2001, totaled nearly $2.7 billion, up from $2.2 billion for projects submitted in 2000. Remember back here that total IRAD for 2001 and 2000 were quoted as $3.3 and $3 billion respectively. This means that the year 2000 saw $800 million in IRAD spending that contractors chose not to report or summarize for the DoD, and $600 million in such funds in 2001. I personally wager this IRAD difference between total reported IRAD and IRAD with DTIC summaries was IRAD performed by contractors for clandestine, deep-sixed USAPs, like UFO Legacy Program Activities. According to TRW's 2001 annual report, the company listed company-funded research and development programs that included both R&D for commercial products and independent research and development, IRAD. In 1999, 2000, and 2001, before Northrop's purchase of TRW in 2002, TRW spent $468 million, $442 million, and $442 million again, respectively, on these company-funded R&D programs. So, TRW was spending near billions in today's money in IRAD leading up to the global war on terror and Northrop Grumman's purchase. Intriguingly, we can learn that TRW lowered R&D spending in automotive applications to increase spending in space and electronics and new programs in aeronautical systems. Indeed, just for accuracy's sake, we can confirm these figures in TRW's 2010K form. Let's compare this to Northrop Grumman's IRAD costs. In 2000 and 2001, Northrop spent $318 and $331 million in IRAD, shockingly less than TRW. But following Northrop's acquisition of TRW in 2002, Northrop's IRAD costs exploded totaling $429 million in 2003, $504 million in 2004, and $538 million in 2005, all in the early days of the War on Terror. And these are just reported IRAD costs. So we can see that following the acquisition of TRW, IRAD costs exploded for Northrop Grumman in the early days of the War on Terror. But of course, that can be expected with increased military-industrial complex spending during wartime, right? Well, check this out. In 2003, shortly after purchasing TRW, Northrop Grumman had to pay $111.2 million to settle a False Claims Act against TRW. Between the years of 1990 and 1997, TRW engaged in 5 separate schemes that increased costs the U.S. government paid TRW. These included mischarging on IRAD, misclassifying private work when performing IRAD, mischarging costs for fabrication and prototyping to avoid IRAD ceilings, and more. And that's not all. TRW actually had been busted for similar misconduct before. In 1989, the General Accounting Office investigated TRW for misclassification of contract costs as IRAD. TRW was even busted again before in 1986, even leading to the departure of a vice president for overcharging on certain defense contracts through independent research and development accounts, bid and proposal accounts, and general and administrative overhead accounts. With so many IRAD schemes under its belt, should it really be far-fetched to theorize TRW and the skeleton of TRW through Northrop Grumman once again harnessed IRAD for misappropriation of funds, this time for self-funding of UFO legacy programs during the early days of the War on Terror? And if that wasn't enough to convince you, I have stumbled upon a gem inside the CIA's FOIA reading room. Dated 5 April 1982, predating any of TRW's IRAD schemes, let us reference this CIA memorandum for the Associate Deputy Director for Science and Technology, DS&T of course, titled, quote, CIA Interference with DoD Tri-Services Committee Re-Industrial Contractors Negotiation of Advanced Agreement on Independent Research and Development, end quote. This memorandum outright directly states, with the Navy's aggressive posture on behalf of the DoD in their negotiations of advanced agreements with contractors for IRAD, elements of the CIA's DS&T recognize an opportunity to channel independent research and development funds into areas of the DS&T's specific needs. The CIA DS&T literally says here they wish to funnel money into specific contractor IRAD spending to bypass quote-unquote seed money that the CIA continuously placed through the Office of Research and Development, or ORD, and Subactivity Group, with contractors such as Lockheed Missiles and Space Company, E-Systems, of course a CIA shell company formerly known as LTV, Rockwell, Harris, and TRW. To say that again, the CIA DS&T is outright stating here that they wanted to channel contractor IRAD funds from corporations such as Lockheed and TRW to support CIA DS&T's efforts in areas of specific need. Are you kidding me here? This to me is an enormous piece of evidence in our investigation. No wonder that shortly after this 1982 memorandum, TRW quickly started getting busted for IRAD schemes starting in 1986. It is likely, to me, TRW was misappropriating funds for the CIA DS&T itself. And as we know, the DS&T is a massive administrative component in UFO legacy activities. I even more strongly theorize now that Northrop Grumman and its acquisition of TRW continued this practice with IRAD to carve off breakaway legacy programs with loose ties to the DS&T, as David Grush outlined for us to distill. At the very least here, I think Northrop Grumman and TRW have leveraged misappropriation of funds to sustain UFO legacy programs. We just explored how David Grush stated the War on Terror saw select contractors harness IRAD. to essentially fund their own siloed UFO legacy activities, and how Northrop Grumman and TRW have displayed extremely concerning IRAD trends in the past. And again, in my legacy program framework, I believe that the overwhelming majority of UFO legacy program operations fall in line with my legacy program pyramid, operating under an extremely strict chain of command and oversight, protected by severe SAP security mechanisms. What if Northrop Grumman operates in a gray area, both enrolls within the standard structure of legacy programs, but also outside of this standard security structure, the quote-unquote weird deep black, both serving US government legacy activity initiatives, as well as their own UFO directives? So I would now like to explore who I believe operates within Northrop's UFO program security structure right now in 2026, and also explore some of this weird Deep Sixth activity that may highlight Northrop operating select programs outside of the normal legacy chain of command. If Northrop Grumman operates its own seemingly siloed portfolio of UFO crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs, Northrop would need an absolutely exceptional security apparatus, would it not? After all, in the traditional legacy program framework, with the utmost confidence, I have stated program protection offices like the AFOSI-PJ, or Office of Special Projects, DARPA SID, or DARPA Security and Intelligence Directorate, Department of Energy OICI, or Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, etc., are paramount to program security. If Northrop is indeed operating their own rogue programs, they would not operate with or enjoy the same SAP security protocols from the above organizations, nor would they receive oversight, personnel, resources, funds, etc. from elements of the intelligence community, armed forces, the National Security Council, specifically the Director of National Program Special Management Staff, NPMS, and more. So essentially, Northrop would have to engage with these programs without a sufficient top cover. So what does any corporation do when they want select personnel, technologies, capabilities, or market exposure? Well, of course, they buy. A one-star general officer makes a maximum of around $200,000 a year. A senior executive service makes around a maximum of $225,000 a year. And to be honest, this is almost chump change for people tasked with defending the nation, entrusted with the US's deepest secrets. But a prime contractor that makes over $40 billion a year in revenue, well, that corporation could shower an executive director with millions of dollars a year, plus stock and options. And we've seen this time and time again in my work. I often say senior DoD and IC personnel trade in their stars and stripes for a business suit to perform similar legacy program work within an FFRDC or contractor with an enormous pay bump following retirement from the United States government. What I'm trying to say here is if Northrop engages in their own breakaway siloed programs, I believe Northrop Grumman could offer competitive advantages to attract extremely seasoned and credentialed senior personnel to their quote-unquote legacy portfolio. In fact, I reckon this can be observed by analyzing the man I theorize runs the entire security enterprise for Northrop Grumman's UFO activities, Mr. Terry Phillips. I recently named Terry Phillips in my Air Force project, hoping to insert Phillips amongst the most prolific UFO legacy program gatekeepers, such as Glenn Gaffney and Doug Wolf. I additionally stated I consider Phillips to be a truly evil individual. And if you are watching right now and have had exposure to Phillips before I named him in my last video, I would be willing to bet anything that you agree with me here. And if AFOSI flags this video as well, hey, PJ Special Agents, grab a coffee and enjoy. Terry Phillips began his career as an Air Force officer before transitioning to the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, or AFOSI. And I will not retread over my last video's content, so go watch to learn more about the OSI there. By the end of his career in government service, Phillips had earned the honor of being appointed a Senior Executive Service Tier 1, the civilian equivalent to a 1-star general or flag officer. Indeed, Phillips' career heights are legendary. Phillips not only served as the SAP Security Director for the entirety of the Air Force, but also served as Executive Director for AFOSI PJ, or OSI Office of Special Projects. As I highlighted in my Air Force project, I believe PJ is an integral program protection element to Air Force UFO WUSAPs and SAPs. Indeed, within these roles is when Phillips would, allegedly, engage in vicious reprisal campaigns against whistleblowers. In 2022, Phillips would leave government service to serve as Senior VP and Chief Security Officer for Leidos, the spawn of SAIC and another contractor I am highly confident is involved with UFO programs. Just 1 year after, Phillips left Leidos to serve as Vice President for Security within Northrop Grumman. From 2023 to today, Phillips has engaged in this role. Though I have never spoken with Ross Coldhart about this matter, I was encouraged to see Ross support my allegations here.
In UAP GERB's latest video posted just a few days ago, the man is prolific. He names names. This is definitely his boldest, bravest naming of names thus far. Is Ross able to corroborate any of them? Given the risk involved, any strength in numbers would be heartwarming.
Let's get to the people who are part of the Legacy Program, and the one I'm very happy to name, of course, is Terry Phillips, the former US Air Force officer and Air Force Office of Special Investigations Special Agent, who was the Executive Director of the Air Force Office of Special Investigations PJ and Air Force Space Force SAP Security Director. He became an SES in August 2020, served as a Senior Security Executive at Leidos and Vice President for Security at Northrop Grumman. Note that. Northrop Grumman. Very interesting. Northrop Grumman. Did I say Northrop Grumman? He is a key gatekeeper figure. And frankly, not a very nice person.
Like myself, I wager that Ross has quite a bit of experience with Northrop Grumman.
Northrop Grumman. Note that. Northrop Grumman. Very interesting. Northrop Grumman. Did I say Northrop Grumman?
Of course, if my allegations are correct, which I stand by fully, Phillips cannot run the entirety of Northrop Grumman's Legacy Program Security enterprise by himself. So, who operates under Phillips? Well, for one, think back to when we discussed Northrop Grumman Mission Systems, an evolution of TRW within Northrop, where I wager legacy programs are likely held alongside other Northrop areas of major operations. And John Freestone, a senior director of security at Northrop Grumman, who stated Mission Systems, quote, reflects the coolest and most dynamic portfolio in the company, end quote. I often state I am confident it is specific executive level positions within defense contractors, such as corporate directors for special programs, SAP security directors, and vice presidents for security that are actually read into UFO legacy programs at a functional level. Although I am still quite confident Northrop Grumman also runs their own in-house UFO retrieval and exploitation programs, I still believe this pattern continues. This is why under Phillips, I strongly theorize John Freestone is a paramount executive safeguarding deep-sixed UFO legacy activities. Freestone has been with Northrop Grumman since 2000, beginning his career as a security manager to rising to the prestigious position of security director. Freestone specializes in enterprise security with a, quote, proven ability to integrate physical, cyber, and insider risk disciplines into a unified enterprise security posture that protects personnel, assets, information, and reputation while enabling business goals and growth, end quote. And, quote, experience protecting mission-critical infrastructure, end quote. Most interesting to me, of course, is Freestone's expertise in insider risk disciplines. My theory around Freestone is just that, a theory. However, I am quite intrigued by his seniority within Northrop's security infrastructure and 2.5 decades at the company that precedes the TRW merger. Outside of Freestone, I am quite intrigued by another current director of security at Northrop Grumman, Mrs. Kathy Andrews. Andrews' early career saw her perform duties as VP of Operations for L3 Communications from 2004 to 2006. Andrews would then immediately move on to Northrop Grumman Information Systems as the security manager from 2006 to 2015. Here, an extremely bizarre gap can be found in Andrews' resume. From 2016 to present, Andrew would serve as Senior Security Manager and eventually Director of Security at Northrop. But from 2015 to 2016, Andrews took nearly a 2-year bizarre hiatus from Northrop to join the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory (APL) as an assistant group supervisor. The Applied Physics Laboratory is a university-affiliated research center, UARC, sponsored by the US Navy. UARCs are essentially the opposite side of the same coin of federally funded research and development centers, FFRDCs. Quote-unquote nonprofit organizations that maintain essential research, development, and engineering of core capabilities, while serving the needs of their long-term strategic DoD sponsors. I have often theorized that UARCs are essentially research and development institutions essential to UFO legacy programs, not as imperative to federally funded research and development centers, but are often sought by specific UFO-related SAPs or WUSAPs to accomplish specific challenging R&D concepts. For example, I have had exposure to a set of alleged UFO legacy programs under the US Army in the early 2000s. One such program sought to adapt electro-optic cloaking systems from a recovered non-human technical vehicle onto US Army ground vehicles, specifically the Next Generation Combat Vehicle. I have specific knowledge that a certain California-based UARC was tacked onto this program, likely via a sole source contract, to work closely with a specific company on complex simulation modeling systems for this program. I would be very keen to investigate if Johns Hopkins University's APL has engaged in similar programs with Northrop Grumman, and thus swapped personnel over the years, like Kathy Andrews here. Perhaps further investigation is warranted here, as Northrop Grumman and the Johns Hopkins APL have a rich history of close collaboration on various defense, space, and technology projects, and as of 2021, co-share office space alongside MITRE and MIT Lincoln Laboratory. Lastly here, I would like to visit with Mr. Vince Devine, Director of Security and SAPCO for Northrop Grumman's Space Systems sector. Not to be confused with the DoD Special Access Program Central Office, SAPCO, and former directors such as Don Dunlop and H. Marshall Ward I speak on often in connection to legacy activities. Devine's bio here likely utilizes SAPCO to signify he is one of the executive seniors within Northrop's internal SAP security offices. After all here, Devine's CV would certainly support this, as he formerly served roles for Mantech, liaising or working intimately with DARPA's Strategic Technology Office as a SAP Functional Area Lead, as well as a Deputy Director of Security supporting USDI SAPCO and DoD SAPCO. Devine also formerly served as Director of Security for East Coast Operations for ACOM, the evolution of EG&G, and I certainly don't believe I need to talk about EG&G here. Devine's CV, from Northrop to supporting DARPA, is riddled with extremely cleared work alongside the USG's most top-secret SAP channels. After all, from 2019 to 2021, Devine even supported Randall G. Walden as Deputy Director of Security for the Air Force RCO, or Rapid Capabilities Office we spoke on earlier, and that I focused a ton of attention on in my Air Force project. If Northrop's UFO programs still answer to a government handler at all, even ever so loosely, specifically in Northrop's space sector, Devine would indeed be the man to serve a critical role, coordinating such WUSAP activities. And again, earlier here, we theorized that at least Northrop's mission and space systems sectors inherited from TRW interface with the UFO portfolio, as does, in my opinion, the Aeronautics Systems Division, through a deep sixth rival to Lockheed Skunk Works we will speak on shortly. There are several directors of security or senior-level SAP security positions outside of Andrews, Devine, and Freestone that operate under Terry Phillips, Northrop's VP for security, that I wager have direct, hands-on experience with clandestine UFO programs. Just as I wager there are several executive-level positions alongside Phillips that engage with the UFO portfolio. And such personnel include one Mr. Michael Dempsey, current Vice President for Government Affairs at Northrop Grumman. Prior to Northrop, Dempsey served a very brief stint as Acting Director of National Intelligence under Trump, but served from 2014 to 2017 as the Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Intelligence Integration under the Obama administration and even served as Obama's primary intelligence briefer. Here, Dempsey led the integration of the U.S. intelligence community's 16 agencies. Dempsey was also a frequent participant in National Security Council, Principal, and Deputy Committee meetings. So, yes, while DDNI for intelligence integration, Dempsey reported directly to Clapper and worked closely with Stephanie O'Sullivan. Indeed, I understand Dempsey worked directly with Clapper on the UFO crash retrieval issue. So if anyone partially briefed Obama on the reality of UFOs either during or after his presidency, it would have been Dempsey at the behest of Clapper. Intriguing that in this weird operation that likely extends all the way to Lou Elizondo and the fake ATIP program, both Dempsey and O'Sullivan have intimate ties to Northrop Grumman and/or TRW. Of course, prior to ODNI, just like O'Sullivan, Dempsey had a storied career with the CIA. Dempsey served as Agency Deputy Associate Director for Military Affairs. He also served as Deputy CIA Representative to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He also served as Deputy Director of the Weapons Intelligence Non-Proliferation Arms Control Center, or CIA WINPAC. According to the excellent journalist Christopher Sharp, the CIA Weapons and Counterproliferation Mission Center, WCPMC, the evolution of WINPAC, quote, produces coordinated assessments for senior policymakers on foreign advanced weapon systems and technologies across the space, air, land, sea, and undersea domains, including UAP, end quote. How intriguing is it that Dempsey was former Deputy Director of WINPAC? And how interesting is it that within a period of retirement from 1998 to 2001, James Clapper moved into the private sector as Director of Intelligence Programs at SRA International. SRA supported the CIA WINPAC on classified intelligence support and information systems work. Although we don't know when exactly Dempsey served as Deputy Director of WINPAC, maybe, just maybe, he, O'Sullivan, and Clapper, through SRA International, all crossed paths in the early 2000s on the UFO issue. So if Northrop runs their own deep sixth UFO legacy programs with limited oversight from the traditional UFO legacy program structure, where are these programs operated? After all, as far as I understand, contractors do not house UFO materials, craft, records, biologics, etc. at contractor locations for active programs. Ended programs? Well, that's another story. But let's just say, for an active reverse engineering program, some Lockheed Martin compound would not be home to recover technical vehicles. But a GOCO institution, government-owned, contractor-operated, that feature Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman might, like Air Force Plant 42 at Palmdale. Indeed, as I like to state, it would be highly cleared hangars on Air Force bases, naval air stations, MRTFBs, STIFs, aka subterranean facilities, or again, GOCO institutions such as FFRDC hangars or Plant 42 that would house such materials. If Northrop gallivants around on their own, recovering and exploiting technical vehicles, I'm willing to bet any amount of money a man like Terry Phillips, who literally ran Air Force SAP security, would not place program materials, craft, hardware, etc. within traditional channels and thus risk exposure of Northrop's self-initiated programs. Well, I reckon here that such work would be done on sites with underground facilities, easy top ground cover, or both. I have long been infatuated with the Northrop Tehone Radar Cross-Section Facility and its sister site, the Lockheed Martin Hellendale Radar Cross-Section Facility, both located in the Antelope aka Aerospace Valley near Palmdale, California. These sites, constructed during the Cold War, operated to utilize high-frequency radio waves to test aircraft's radar signatures. This military testing aids in the development of stealth technologies by reducing radar cross-section, and sites like Tehone were instrumental in the development of stealth technology specifically for the B-2 Spirit bomber. These sites employed large runways and pylons raised from underground on concrete diamonds as mountain pads to blast craft and materials with radar. Due to Cold War spycraft, much of the infrastructure of Tehone, Hellendale, and the former McDonnell Douglas RCS facility were built below ground to hide from Soviet prying eyes. And if you are skeptical or weary about the actual underground infrastructure here, take a look at this clip from a 2008 video titled, quote, "Stealth, video from Lockheed Martin," end quote. Yeah, original, that features footage from underneath Hellendale.
This is the operations center at the Hellendale Measurement Facility. This room has been used to collect data on some of the most famous aircraft in history, and for a number of designs that I can't talk about. What we typically do here is take data to see if it matches our designs, matches our predicted data. And then when it comes out as low as possible, that's always a good thing. Well, I see a lot of things coming. I see stealth technology evolving. I see it being used on a lot more platforms, a lot more aircraft, a lot of other things also. Right now, an aircraft designed in the late 50s and early 60s holds the world speed record. I see aircraft being designed that'll go Mach 6. We're working on aircraft to go Mach 10. So Flash Gordon is coming, and I see that really in our future.
After all, as far as Tehone goes, the Center for Land Use Interpretation did describe the RCS range as housing, quote, "elaborate underground facilities," end quote. I have talked about Tehone and Hellendale numerous times throughout my videos, famously discussing the XF-131 Super Sentinel, an allegedly real triangular craft featuring anomalous reverse-engineered components, described to forensic artist Bill McDonald in 1992 by 2 Lockheed and 2 Northrop engineers hailing from Hellendale and Tehone. Additionally, I have referenced these RCS facilities in regards to a massive network of deep underground military bases that sprawl under the Antelope Valley, with major stations under Edwards Air Force Base in China Lake. And I will maintain to this day, I am extremely confident that this network of stiffs that performs work on UFO storage, exploitation, and retrieval is very real and very active. I do have to state, I do remain skeptical of some of the claims regarding this underground infrastructure, such as some stating Tehone houses a reported 42 underground levels. However, I do recommend watching my video on DUMBs to learn more about Tehone and the Antelope Valley UFO-related DUMB-specific claims, such as engineers claiming to UFO researcher Bill Hamilton they were involved in digging out a massive complex beneath Tehone dubbed the Anthill. I will be super plain here. I do believe alongside its traditional RCS work, Tehone, like Hellendale, was indeed imperative to Western Range UFO Legacy Program operations. The question is, since Tehone is officially closed as of 2011, Did the work stop, or does it continue today? Though RCS testing has been conducted on Tohon since the 1980s, Northrop was officially leasing the land from Tohon Ranch Company. This lease continued until 1998, when Northrop Grumman purchased the entire 1,415 acres of land on which Tohon RCS was located. Of course, clandestine testing continued up until the site's alleged closure in 2011, when it was claimed nearby photovoltaic installations and wind farms interfered with radar cross-section testing. Regardless of its quote-unquote official closing in 2011, rumors and stories have persisted of strange lights and a vigilant security presence over Tohon, and I explored several of these in my video on DUMBs. Indeed, as of late 2024, Northrop Grumman has apparently sold ownership of the property to an LLC. This information comes from the incredible Anders from Uncanny Expeditions.
Interestingly enough, I did a little bit of digging on the way down here, and it turns out that Northrop Grumman no longer owns the property. Now, I don't know if they operate here in any capacity, but the actual ownership is now under an LLC. And I wasn't able yet to trace the ownership of that LLC, so I'm going to keep digging on that.
And in the making of this video, Anders has made some big breakthroughs on this sale of the Tohon property, and has graciously shared his findings with me, including the Tohon sales brochure. In November of 2024, Tohon was sold to a company called EDF Power Solutions. Anders called the company, who informed him the property was sold again to a company called Scout Clean Energy that was doing business under Keyhole Wind LLC. Anders has tried reaching out to Scout Clean Energy, including to its CEO, with no success. Essentially, Tohon Range will serve as an expansion for a major wind energy project to be completed by 2028. And to be plain here, I can observe nothing nefarious or bizarre about this acquisition. It appears to be very above board. Perhaps this sale of land is why recent explorations onto the surface of Tohon have been conducted by brave civilians. Maybe, just maybe, Northrop's surface-level security infrastructure is no longer present here. It took until late 2025 for a seasoned outdoorsman, Anders of course, to get onto the Tohon property and film some of the RCS runways and pylons. You all know Anders, incredible guy and incredible channel. I strongly recommend checking out his project, What Were They Hiding at Tohon?, scouting Northrop Grumman's secret site in the Antelope Valley. Alas, while he did get drone footage, Anders did not travel onto the main Tohon campus himself, and to be frank, I don't blame him. Fast forward to the making of this video, when an absolute madman with a channel called Wasteland by Wednesday actually set foot on Tohon's campus in an incredible video titled Inside the Abandoned Northrop Aerospace Facility at Tohon Ranch.
I sat here for a moment as fair game, giving any legal authority one last chance to tell me something or inform me of my rights, but barring that, all bets were off and it would be time to get low and on foot.
Arriving to the compound's exterior, Wasteland by Wednesday was shocked at the clean look for a facility abandoned for 15 years. Noting the complete lack of graffiti abandoned sites often feature.
I'm telling you, if I didn't know better right now, I would say that this place was barely closed down just a short time ago. Or at least maybe someone's been caretaking for the place all these years. There aren't even any tumbleweeds or other natural types of debris to break up the uncanny lack of artificial debris. Still, official record as well as satellite imagery clearly tells us that this place has been closed and empty since 2011. But despite the official information, that is a hard and unrealistic pill to swallow.
Both Wasteland, Anders, and myself all believe Tohon is remarkably kept for a site abandoned for so long. So the question I have to ask here is the site staged to appear derelict and abandoned?
That is one of my biggest issues here as I walk around. This site is just too clean. The buildings are clean, the cracked asphalt is clean, and even what little apparent vandalism and wire stripping that there is looks like it was done just too clean. Almost like it may have been staged. To someone that isn't very familiar with other abandoned locations in the general region and such, maybe this looks normal. But to someone who has spent a significant amount of time in modern ruins, this is very much outside the norm. Our standard desert raiders don't do it like this. And between them, the high winds, baking sun, and destructive critters, nothing stays this clean and tidy for 15 years.
Wasteland's hour-long video on Tohon campus is absolutely jaw-dropping, and I strongly recommend viewing the whole thing. I mean, seriously, this to me is once-in-a-lifetime type of stuff. While walking through the various hangars, Wasteland found a multitude of spent bullet casings. What is bizarre about this is no bullet holes or subsequent food waste, beverage cans, or signs of presence were found alongside the spent brass that one would expect to find from civilian shooters looking for a fun place to relax. At about 31 minutes into the video, Wasteland entered a room in a building that housed facilities for executives and featured numerous security locks and systems. Within one room, Wasteland found a series of scattered documents. UFO documents, a collection of copies of Project Blue Book documents, and this to me is shockingly darkly comical. Both Anders and Wasteland got a decently comprehensive exploration of the surface of Tohon, but as we discussed, with infrastructure being housed underground during the Cold War to hide from prying eyes, the surface is not where we would expect to find remnants of program activity. The singular building Wasteland was unable to gain access into is the Tohon generator room. This building was still locked up tight, with meager attempts to make it look like looters had attempted to pry their way into the building, according to Wasteland. When analyzing some of the massive air filtration or cooling stacks on the rear of this locked generator building, Wasteland was able to observe a gated ventilation shaft going towards the underground infrastructure.
Now, Anders over at the Uncanny Expeditions YouTube channel that I originally found out about this place through, he mentioned that he had information of some underground components to this facility, underground sections that may still be in use, okay? And this right here, my friends, this goes down. Now, when I start to think about it, I'm thinking that this was never a generator building at all. Something you would definitely need for an underground facility is a way to pump in and filter an air supply. And that's exactly what I think we're looking at here. This was obviously providing a massive volume of air to somewhere. But where? Do I have any HVAC viewers in the audience who may want to educate me about just how big a system I'm looking at here? Hello?
Anders from Uncanny Expeditions seems to have encountered obstruction of Tohon's underground facilities himself. Indeed, when analyzing the RCS pylon tracks, where diamonds on the surface of the RCS testing range would raise up from underground, housing airframes for RCS testing, Anders encountered an apparent obstruction warding off the underground infrastructure.
But it looks like we have some kind of a pit here, which is interesting. Let's see what we have here. Wow, so it almost looks like it would have gone deeper and there's some kind of a cover bolted down over the hole, because it kind of looks like that ladder would keep going if it weren't for whatever's blocking it there.
So of course, again, the question here must be asked. Do clandestine operations continue below the Tohon RCS facility in weirdly both acknowledged and unacknowledged underground infrastructure, while using the above-ground closed campus as a top cover, making the property appear abandoned and derelict? Well, the idea of an underground facility using a surface-level cover is not unheard of. In fact, I have covered other examples of this in my dumb video. Examples here include the CIA operating a STIF or subterranean facility underneath the U.S. Army Training Center in Warrenton, Virginia, as well as the NSA operating a clandestine facility beneath the Sugar Grove Naval Communications Center in West Virginia. In private conversations, I have heard many testimonies regarding derelict buildings, or shacks, operating as cover while also housing elevators or access to unacknowledged covert facilities in New Mexico and western Texas. While Wasteland by Wednesday and Anders were not harassed or chased off the Tejon Range, there are several accounts that say otherwise, implying a strong security presence and bizarre operations well past Tejon's official closure in 2011. These include a gentleman who claimed in 2020, when riding a bike near Tejon, he observed a Black Hawk-type helicopter land near the large hangar at Tejon, sit for about 20 minutes, then depart eastward. The poster claimed when loitering near the security fence, he observed a burst of light from the facility, whereas his skin began to feel like it was on fire. The poster got extremely nauseous and was forced to leave the area for his own health. With all this recent discussion of the discombobulator, a direct energy weapon, likely, in my opinion, a microwave weapon, used in Venezuela, causing nausea and skin burning to subdue Venezuelan forces, a second look needs to be taken at this testimony.
It can deter individuals on a military perimeter all the way up to a riotous crowd, all without permanent harm.
It only penetrates 1/64 of an inch of your skin, goes very shallow into where your nerve receptors are, and there's no permanent injury caused by it. Very safe system. We built in some safety margins, training for the operators.
They even let any of the guests volunteer to test out its effectiveness and safety, including the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, and Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Most described it as feeling like a hot oven or grill being opened up.
I am quite confident in my thesis of Terry Phillips, Freestone, Devine, Andrews, Dempsey, and some others I don't necessarily have the bravery to mention just yet, as leading the security infrastructure behind Northrop Grumman's involvement in UFO programs. If Northrop does indeed operate their own UFO retrieval and exploitation programs, largely separate from traditional legacy structure, with loose oversight from elements of the DoD and IC, I think there is a very strong argument Northrop conducts such operations in plain sight, yet hidden behind top cover. Though it has maintained prominence in UFO lore for decades, the secrets under Tejon have still yet to be cracked. I personally believe this derelict yet maintained cover facility, soon to be the site for a wind farm, houses extensive underground facilities that actively engage with Northrop's UFO portfolio. With mention of Phillips and his cadre of Northrop security goons operating security and program protection, surrounding Northrop's UFO program portfolio and the possibility of seemingly decrepit sites like Northrop Tejon, housing underground UFO program infrastructure, the question now must be asked. Who or what institution within Northrop Grumman actually performs reverse engineering and test and evaluation of recovered UFOs? I say this because I strongly believe that Northrop Grumman, even more than Lockheed or other prime peers, has achieved unrivaled success in applying non-human technologies to human-made airframes. Whether it's the TR-3B or a similarly named electrogravitic triangle, man-made saucer-shaped craft, diamond-shaped sleek vehicles, or others, I believe Northrop Grumman has played a deft hand in the construction of alien reproduction vehicles. And I strongly recommend watching part 1 of my Northrop project to learn more there, as claims of Northrop and ARV were a massive component of that project. As I stated, I believe that both mission and space systems operate within Northrop's UFO activities. largely continuing on the legacy of TRW, specifically TRW Systems Group. As does within Northrop, Northrop's famed Aeronautics Division. Lockheed Martin infamously possesses the Skunk Works Division that is largely inseparable from the topic of alien reproduction vehicles and some of humans' most innovative stealth aircraft. And we spoke of Skunk Works at length in my Lockheed Martin project. Boeing has its mysterious Phantom Works as well, we will talk about in a future project. Northrop Grumman possesses, or possessed its own division that dealt with top secret and highly classified aeronautics projects that has seemingly largely disappeared. I am speaking here of the Northrop Advanced Technology and Design Center, or NATDC. The NATDC, considered Northrop's own version of the Lockheed Skunk Works, is nearly untraceable, with only brief flashes of mentions throughout the 1990s. From what we can discover, NATDC was formed at least by 1991 at Northrop's Pico Rivera facility in Los Angeles County, California. Pico Rivera served as the primary site for B-2 bomber development and production. NATDC was formed to preserve Northrop's expertise on core defense programs and retain/advanced technical prowess following the B-2 program, particularly to adapt innovative breakthroughs with the B-2 program onto new airframes. According to the Secret Projects Forum, the 1991 Dayton Air Show featured a handout of several NADTC projects. These designs will be confirmed shortly in a 1992 Aviation Week in Space Technology magazine, but just hold on for a moment. The Dayton handout in question here shows several airframe concepts from NATDC as well as a composite STOVL, or short takeoff and vertical landing composite wing design we can confirm from newspaper clippings. Airframes here include an F-16 derivative, a multi-role fighter, a high-reliability fighter, the AX, and CASX. Featured here were even more innovative designs, including a low-cost fighter, advanced pilot interface technologies, an Arrowhead AX design, and a special-purpose stealth aircraft meant to transport Special Operations Forces. Now, I would be remiss here if I didn't draw parallels to the Fluxliner story in the 1998 Norton Air Force Base Air Show encounter of Brad Sorensen. According to Brad, alongside the three man-made flying saucer Fluxliners nicknamed Mama, Papa, and Little Bear, the classified portion of the air show additionally featured intriguing airframes, including the remote-piloted Aurora, a losing competitor to the B-2 bomber, VTOL troop transports, and more. I noticed similar designs here between Brad's descriptions, Mark McCandlish's illustrations, and NADTC's airframe concepts. If indeed these connections are tangible, one must wonder if NADTC also worked on the Fluxliners and featured their work at the 1988 Norton Air Force Base Air Show. Following 1992's Aviation Week in Space Technology, almost all mentions of NADTC vanish. And that isn't to say the division was dissolved in the 1994 Northrop and Grumman merger. No, we can find sparse mentions after. These include a 1994 NASA technical report referencing talks given by the NADTC, NATDC being named as active at the Pico Rivera Northrop Grumman location in the 1996 to 1997 World Aircraft and Systems Directory, and a 1999 NASA paper featuring NATDC under mention of NASA Ames Research Center Gravitational Research Branch. Post-1999, however, I can find nothing of NADTC. I cannot help but notice the suspicious timeline that the Northrop Advanced Technology and Design Center disappears right before Northrop Grumman allegedly began their own breakaway UFO crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs. Indeed, I personally believe that the NATDC continues work to this day within Northrop Grumman, but in a capacity even more secret than the Lockheed Skunk Works. serving as Northrop Grumman's own in-house RDT&E institution that constructs alien reproduction vehicles and derivative airframes, with little to no accountability with a government sponsor/handler, likely funded through self-fund and IRAD. To this day, I can only find 3 individuals connected to the Advanced Technology and Design Center, all 3 of whom possess extremely robust and accomplished CVs, which again makes me question, why did an advanced airframe development group within Northrop Grumman, staffed with some of the brightest and most seasoned Northrop engineers, seemingly disappear overnight? One such individual is an accomplished engineer and project manager by the name of Richard Carrion. Possessing several engineering degrees, Carrion served from the mid-1990s as a principal engineer for Boeing and principal engineer for Rockwell Collins. From 1993 to 1996, however, Carrion served as a project engineer for Northrop Grumman, specializing in propulsion, who began his career at Northrop as a lead propulsion engineer for the B-2 propulsion performance. Throughout his Northrop career, Carrion served as a propulsion integrated product team leader for a high-budget unmanned vehicle project and led numerous projects for the Northrop Advanced Technology and Design Center. These NADTC projects include propulsion integrated product team leader for an affordable lightweight fighter, ALF, airframe ITP leader for a short takeoff and vertical landing STOVL joint tactical aircraft, SJTA. And in that position, Carrion was responsible for, quote, coordinating all technical design activities for this multi-role fighter, IRAD, end quote. And finally, a lead propulsion engineer on a multi-role fighter, or MFR. And if you recall earlier, these 3 airframe designs were featured in NATDC's 1991 handout. Intriguing how Carrion served a primary engineering role within all of these projects. Since these STOVLs, multi-role fighters, and affordable lightweight fighter designs were never truly realized as functional via multi-million-dollar IRAD, one must wonder if these NATDC airframe projects were a front for something more exotic. We can also look to a 1995 book titled, quote, Creative Action and Organization, Ivory Tower Visions and Real-World Voices, end quote, and observe contributor to the book, Air Force Brigadier General Delbert H. Jacobs, who served at this time of 1995 as Vice President and Center Manager for the Northrop Advanced Technology and Design Center. Here we have an additional rare opportunity to learn more about the NATDC. The book describes the center as, quote, responsible for originating, coordinating, and directing all Northrop research, technology development, and design efforts in future manned and unmanned aircraft systems, as well as other advanced applications, end quote. Jacobs' own obituary described this position within Northrop as head of, quote, advanced stealth fighter design and development, end quote. Prior to his career within Northrop's classified programs, Jacobs served a seasoned and accomplished general officer role, including supporting the Deputy Chiefs of Staff, specifically Deputy Chief of Staff for Research, Development, and Acquisition as Deputy for General Purpose Forces. Indeed, prior to this in July of 1981, Jacobs also served as the Deputy Chief of Staff for Plans and Programs at Air Force Systems Command Headquarters. As we know from my Air Force project, former Major Command Air Force Systems Command, AFSC, served as the Evolution of Air Research and Development Command, ARDC, the major R&D division of the fledgling U.S. Air Force. And the now defunct AFSC comprises half of Air Force Materiel Command, the modern-day Air Force's primary R&D major command. I highly recommend my Air Force project to learn more about how MAGCOMs factor into the UFO Legacy Program framework. Lastly here, we can look to a 1991 American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, AIAA, Wright Brothers lecture titled, quote, Technology in the Lives of an Aircraft Designer, end quote, delivered by I.T. Walland, Vice President and Chief Designer of Northrop Corporation's Advanced Technology and Design Center. This lecture on aeronautics is one of the AIAA's most prestigious honors. Thus, it is quite intriguing to see a Northrop VP and Chief Designer of the NATDC deliver such a speech from an organization lost to time. Interesting to me here is Wallen's Figure 1 Spectrum of Designs. Here we can see several incredible engineering feats under Northrop and some interesting projects following the 1980s. These include quote-unquote stealth programs, featuring a delta or diamond-shaped vehicle alongside the B-2 and an amorphous Advanced Tactical Aircraft program. Irv Walland is legendary in the aerospace field. After all, Walland formed and led the design team that created the B-2 Spirit bomber. Walland was named Vice President, Engineering and Advanced Technology for the B-2 division and named Vice President, Chief Designer of Northrop in 1988. But weirdly enough, his CV has no extensive mention to his work on the NATDC. I am truly perplexed here that such a legend of stealth airframes, who literally spearheaded the Northrop Advanced Technology Bomber program, outside of this 1991 AIAA speech, makes no mention of the NATDC. So we have seen that the NATDC worked on some incredible aeronautics and stealth projects, including a plethora of airframe designs, and featured some of Northrop's most seasoned and brightest engineers. But what happened to the center? As we have shown, mentions of the Advanced Technology and Design Center drop off a cliff following 1999. And things in the 1990s even get hairy sometimes, with some documents dropping the design in NATDC for development, including this 1996 AIAA paper and 1994 SAE paper. Well, we don't know why the center went dark, but perhaps we can find out where it lives today in Northrop's Aeronautics Division. Recall that the NATDC operated out of Northrop's Pico Rivera facility. In 2000 or 2001, Pico Rivera's laboratories and technical facilities were moved to El Segundo, California, home of the AEROSPACE Corporation, and rolled under the newly established Northrop Grumman Advanced Systems Development Center, ASDC. In the early 2000s, this new ASDC was critical to RDT&E of UAVs or unmanned aerial vehicles, including the X-47A Pegasus, which was funny enough quote-unquote company-funded and a quote-unquote private venture, which quite possibly means a major IRAD project in the early 2000s. By 2003, the year of Northrop's acquisition of TRW, NATDC and the ASDC disappear completely, lost within Northrop Grumman, though likely still operating through Northrop's Classified Aeronautics Division out of Air Force Plant 42 in Palmdale, California. When you see a black triangular craft with a light on each vertex and perhaps one center light in the middle, I wonder if such a craft featuring derivative technologies is a product of a name only spoken in whispers: the Northrop Advanced Technology and Design Center. What's going on, guys? It is Gerb, and as always, if you have made it this far with me, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Believe it or not, when I set out to make this project, Northrop Grumman Part 2, or a better description, Northrop Grumman and TRW, my original plan was to keep this video under 2 hours. We saw how that went. I think you're joining me here now about 3 hours and 10 minutes into the project. At this point, it's just impossible. I wanted to keep this a short and concise video, but that's just not how I do things. Maybe in the future, I'll take on some topics that require a little less to go through. To me, at least, it is a personal miracle I was able to get this project out at all. This has been the hardest project I've ever worked on. A little bit because of the subject matter, but also because of, the It's Probably Nothing tour I went to in both Austin and Montreal. And then just some life stuff going on. It was really hard to get this project done, so I appreciate you joining me so much. And of course, if you're new to the channel, At the end of these videos, I go on 10, 15-minute rants about, the investigations and what we spoke about and so forth. So why don't we go ahead and get that started? I'm recording this outro to the video on the 19th of March. The 18th of March, yesterday, Matthew Brown made a new appearance on the Weaponized podcast where he discussed coordinated attacks against whistleblowers from an individual whose most recent position was in Northrop Grumman. If that doesn't tell you how imperative Northrop Grumman is to a security apparatus to legacy programs, I don't know what will. Let me be plain here. This individual, I've talked about Terry Phillips. I maintain, and I tweeted this. If you're watching this, go check my Twitter, that Terry Phillips, as Vice President of Security for Northrop Grumman, is the tip of the spear for the security architecture behind Northrop's UFO retrieval and reverse engineering efforts. The individual Matthew Brown was speaking about is not Terry Phillips, but somebody who works under Terry Phillips. Now, people are saying, is that an individual named Michael Smith, who's currently SAPCO for DARPA? No, that it is not Michael Smith. He worked for Northrop Grumman from 04 to 06, working on SAPs between DARPA and the NRO. So, no, but like I said, with Phillips, there are multiple such individuals. So let me be plain here. I talked about Terry Phillips in my Air Force project. I stated, or I alleged, because remember, this is all for entertainment purposes only. I'm playing a character, so I am making allegations here, that whilst Executive Director of PJ and Air Force SAP Security Director for the entire Air Force, Terry Phillips engaged in reprisal campaigns against whistleblowers. He retired as SES and those positions in 2021, where he moved on to Leidos and now Northrop Grumman. I believe, although he interfaces with legacy operations at both the Air Force and now Northrop Grumman, these are in different capacities, and I need to make that very clear. Whilst operating in the programs for the Air Force, I believe that Terry Phillips and other elements of PJ were deputized assets under the legacy architecture originating from the National Security Council to pursue insider and outsider threat protection. I think for Northrop Grumman, Terry Phillips is literally in charge of the entire security apparatus for Northrop's breakaway programs. And that's one of the biggest through lines of today's episode. I thank God for David Grush, what he says in a 14-minute interview with Megyn Kelly. There is more actionable intelligence in there than 3-4-hour podcasts with most UFO personalities or individuals. One of the most critical things David Grush spoke about is that in the onset of the War on Terror, certain contractors began using IRAD, Independent Research and Development, to kickstart their own UFO retrieval and reverse engineering programs. And I maintain that that is indeed true, and that Northrop Grumman is the biggest conspirator of those breakaway efforts. So if we're talking about misappropriation of funds, if we're talking about breakaway programs, illegal use of IRAD and so forth, Northrop Grumman is where the Congress should look to immediately. And as we proved with both TRW and Northrop Grumman, and that's not even mentioning Huntington Ingalls Industrials, names escape me right now, Northrop Grumman had to settle a lawsuit for their IRAD infractions and funding schemes before too. So TRW, leading up to Northrop's purchase in 2002, had five at least in the 1990s, IRAD fraud schemes, and even more dating back to the GAO in 1986. And as we saw with trends with Northrop Grumman and IRAD, right on the onset of the War on Terror, again, it's to be expected that IRAD for prime contractors would increase, seen as there is a war going on, but we saw a large, I think, 27% increase in IRAD spending. And we also saw that in 1991, up until 2012, there were systems in place where contractors did not have to submit summaries to DTIC, the Defense Technical Information Center, on their IRAD activities. So ostensibly, contractors like Northrop Grumman could maintain IRAD, do whatever the heck they wanted, and still bill the DoD for it. And in my opinion, that is Northrop Grumman's own crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. There are stories I'm sure many of you have heard of kinetic encounters with various corporate teams. I'm not so sure that's, although I think Lockheed has done that as well, the stories in the public zeitgeist aren't just referring to Lockheed Martin. And as we've heard, there have been certain figures associated with Northrop Grumman and very weird programs operating out of very weird sites. So this is a part 2, but I could do a part 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 with Northrop. Northrop Grumman are the bad guys in the prime contractor legacy portfolio section. There is such a thing as blue programs with UFO legacy programs. These are commonly programs that originate from the National Security Council or elements of the National Security Council. They involve schemes like the administrative structure I proposed in my Air Force project, SAF-AA, SAF-AQ, AFTE. And these are generally done with oversight, not traditional oversight from Congress and the Gang of Eight, but strict yet stripped oversight channels. So let's back up now that we've said all that. So the project today mainly focused on individuals connected with Northrop Grumman and TRW, and that's a huge talking point I want to go through again. We discussed individuals like Donald C. Winters, connected to TRW and the SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative. If you've watched any of my videos, I maintain quite often that SDI back-channeled funds to both UFO legacy programs and featured hidden implementations of offensive weapons against UFOs, whether that be X-ray weapons, microwave weapons. I'm not a physicist. I don't know, but I am confident in those assertions. The primary figures we spoke about today, let's just start with the AEROSPACE Corporation. I know we talked about that today. That is imperative because it was a spinoff from TRW and the Space Technologies Laboratories. We talked about Randall G. Walden and we talked about Edward C. Aldrich. I'm not going to talk about Randall Walden anymore because if you want to learn about the RCO, which in my opinion is absolutely paramount to understand when discussing blue UFO legacy programs, Edward C. Aldrich was Undersecretary of the Air Force, Secretary of the Air Force, Director of the NRO, Aerospace Corporation, etc. I maintain that the outside activities we learned about in the SAF history of the SAF-AA, SAF-AA being the administrative assistant to the Secretary of the Air Force, whilst Undersecretary of the Air Force in the early 1980s, Edward C. Aldrich rolled these outside activities, which were programs outside of the Air Force that the Air Force had administrative and operational control over, in my opinion, joint UFO legacy programs with the NRO specifically, and rolled them under the SAF-AA, which is crazy because those outside activities bypass the AAZ, Info/Special Access Program Oversight/Security Protection. That acronym's so long for me, sometimes I even forget, but this AAZ is ostensibly the SAPOC for various parts of the Air Force. So that is a huge tipper to me that Edward C. Aldrich, who has a storied history at the Aerospace Corporation, was imperative in basically setting up the siloed infrastructure of legacy programs today. Now, Northrop Grumman and TRW, we spoke about Stephanie O'Sullivan here. Her name hasn't made the rounds as much as I think it should. In that same Megyn Kelly interview, David Grush spoke that James Clapper had control over elements of the crash retrieval issue, and he was supported greatly by his PDDNI, Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence, Stephanie O'Sullivan. As we saw with Stephanie O'Sullivan, and let's excuse her former spook career in the CIA, because whether it's Michael Dempsey, whether it's Stephanie O'Sullivan, whether it's Meyerix, whether it's Doug Wolf, whether it's Glenn Gaffney, all of these folks have some sort of very spook history within the agency before, during, and after some of their legacy work. Stephanie O'Sullivan began her career around 1982 within TRW. This was a series of sensitive and classified projects for specifically the Navy, and then she went on to O&I before moving to agency. I find it intriguing that she crossed paths with Don Meyerix in 1981 to 1983, who was at TRW during that time, and probably Richard Haver as well, as we discussed. I'm sorry if you see behind me right now, my screen is going a little bit crazy. Please forgive that. Stephanie O'Sullivan is a critical individual to enter into this conversation about the modern-day legacy program structure. I believe, with confidence might I add, that Dick Cheney was the last head of the snake of the UFO legacy program structure to have sort of oversight over a wide portfolio of legacy activities. The closest thing to that, now the closest thing, not meaning he had the same influence or abilities as Dick Cheney, but the closest thing, even though I think that position, the head of the snake of the legacy pyramid, was a shell of itself by this time, was Clapper. So it is imperative we study Stephanie O'Sullivan. It is imperative we discuss Michael Dempsey, the Deputy Director for National Intelligence for Intelligence Integration, Obama's primary intelligence briefer that then moved on to Northrop Grumman as Vice President for Government Affairs. Remember, on the other side of the prime coin, former Vice President of Government Affairs Mary Kay Sturtevant, who is that VP position from 2006 to 2021, was the individual who back-channeled to CIA DS&T Deputy Director Glenn Gaffney about the proposed Kona Blue transfer from Jim Ryder of Lockheed Martin Space Sciences Company to the OSAT program and BASS. So if that doesn't tell you how important that role is, I don't know what will. We also talked about Richard Haver. Richard Haver, of course, served a similar position as VP for Intelligence from both TRW and Northrop Grumman. He was a great friend and protege of Dick Cheney as well. He was hand-selected by Dick Cheney to serve as, I can't quite remember his role at the moment, but Dick Cheney created his advisory role to the Secretary of Defense solely so Richard Haver could come work with Cheney. And then Dick Cheney also pulled, what's his name, Richard Haver, to assist with the intelligence presidential transition. So Richard Haver is another individual with quite the stacked CV I would be very interested to hear speak. We talked about Terry Phillips again, and I'm so happy that that name is starting to make its way into the public zeitgeist. I encourage everybody to remember Terry Phillips, and we talked about the security apparatus under Terry Phillips and some individuals that I wager work with Terry in the security of Northrop's UFO efforts. These include Vincent Devine, John Freestone, and Kathy Andrews. There are others. There are others that I'm not quite bold enough to name yet. And I think I said it earlier in the video, but that is the truth. That is why when Matthew Brown and George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell decide to redact a name of a Northrop individual on the Weaponized podcast, they are not playing around. It took a long time for me to muster up the courage for me to talk about Terry Phillips. When I made my Air Force project, I had quite a few internal freakouts about naming him. Only after a while, I decided to, because guys like Terry Phillips, guys like this other person, and oftentimes people connected to Northrop are not good people. They take their insider and outsider threat protection very seriously. And I think as time continues, we will start to see that the name Terry Phillips will be entered into the public zeitgeist even more. Let's talk about some fun stuff too, because TRW, hold that thought. So this is the second time in my projects I have teased an exploration into Zodiac, okay? I know I've done that twice. So, original 1998 edition of UFO Magazine. This has the first of 3 of the Zodiac story, okay? I just got this so I could have the original print of the Zodiac story. So I promise you, sometime soon, we will do an investigation to that. I want to as well because I find it so intriguing. And including, I have my problems with Eric Davis. I still listen to everything he says. His recent debate or conversation with Eric Weinstein on American Alchemy. Davis spoke that one of his primary sources for his finger on the pulse of the legacy topic was a woman at TRW. So I will do everything I can to find out who that woman is, whether it's the pseudonym behind Sedge Masters, Mary, can't remember her name at this moment, Elizabeth Scott. We will see. Also, I wanted to give a huge shout out to Anders from Uncanny Expeditions and Wasteland by Wednesday for their bold trekking onto the Tahone radar cross-section facility. Again, this site was allegedly closed in 2011. I have gone out on a limb, and I will go out again, that there is a presence of Northrop Grumman under Tahone that likely still exists to this day, engaged with the UFO issue. As Wasteland said throughout his crazy video, which to me is one of the most insane videos I have ever seen on YouTube, the site is staged too clean and too immaculate. As he said, the site almost appears as if somebody wanted the facility to look abandoned and decrepit. I'm intrigued by Building 113. As am I intrigued with the Blue Book documents that were left inside one of the administration buildings. That to me is quite a comical troll. And I am interested to see how that story unfolds if more brave, intrepid explorers are willing to go onto those grounds. What else did we talk about today, guys? There's still much more to be said about TRW. We talked about Dr. Ed Dahl as well, Edward Bushnell Dahl. I think being able to connect Dahl to TRW, to Space Technologies Laboratory, to TRW Systems Group, to now Northrop Grumman Mission Systems and Space Systems is imperative as well. A lot of the time, whether I make an Aztec case, whether I make a Kingman case, whether I make a Kecksburg case, a lot of the time these cases or these UFO crash retrievals or these legacy program efforts, when I would talk about Robert Starbacher and Vannevar Bush occurred in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Dr. Dahl is a perfect example of how 50s era crash retrievals or 50s era figures can parlay into valuable and actionable study of figures today. Dr. Eric Henry Wang, he gets all the spotlight from the Kingman case, but he died in 1960. I think he was only 54 to 56 years old, which is tragic. Dr. Dahl lived a long and fruitful life. He worked on the Manhattan Project. He worked on Operation Upshot Knothole, SRI, then moved on to TRW, where he retired as an executive VP in 1979. And as we see with some of the projects he spearheaded and the divisions on TRW Systems Group, and TRW Special Projects, which was intimately involved with Pine Gap, Australia, and NRO Program B that feature the CIA DS&T. There's real tangible things for us to work with here. This was a incredibly fun project for me to make. Again, very difficult just with stuff going on, but I'm very happy that we have a Northrop Part 2 now. And when I made my first project, I focused too much on whistleblower claims and so forth. This project is up to snuff with my investigations today. So eventually I'll make a super cut of the two projects and put them together. And at that point, gosh, I think that'd be a 4.5-hour video. So we'll do that sometime. But with that being said, guys, you'll notice a new background behind me. I'm trying to spice up the place. I still got to play with some of the focus so I can show off some of my goods. Behind me to my left is a Lockheed. Yes, it's a pre-merger. It's a Lockheed ad from 1985. I have a TRW rapid prototyping ad from 1985. Above my head, a BDM ad from 1985, and right behind me, another TRW ad. So maybe in the future, I am trying to build out. I also have a TR3B model behind me on my right shoulder that I'm not going to unbox. But in the future, I might set up a PO box or something. So if there's patches, if there's challenge coins, if there's shirts or cool models people have made or artwork they want to show off, I can incorporate that into the background. I would love to. I'm huge into collectibles. So specifically challenge coins, that's what I would like the most. At the It's Probably Nothing tour in Montreal, a bloke walked up to me, said I would have made a great intelligence official, handed me a challenge coin from one of the Canadian intelligence agencies that made my week. Same with meeting GSP, George St. Pierre, the greatest MMA fighter of all time. With that being said, by the time this project releases, I'll already be on to the next one. I have a Patreon if you want to support the channel. I don't gatekeep content, so please just support what you think the channel is worth. Your watch, your like, your subscribe, your comment, that means the world to me. And I also have memberships as well here on YouTube. Right now, all I can provide extra for that are some cool badges. So, if you want an AFOSI badge or a cool badge to comment by, I have that too. But I appreciate everybody so much for being here. So many bright things to look forward to. I will remain optimistic in the disclosure process. We'll see how it goes. Remember the name Northrop Grumman. Remember that Northrop Grumman is not a good group of people. Remember that Northrop Grumman engages in their own breakaway UFO activities. Remember the name Michael Dempsey. Remember the name Stephanie O'Sullivan. Remember the name Richard Haver. And most importantly, remember the name Terry Phillips. I'll see everybody next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.